I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you.
I'm so excited.
With child number 4 in tow, who's just off camera. What is going on with Macron?
I mean, it's the craziest thing that's ever happened, certainly in my life. It's been repeatedly crazy, from the Trump call to the lawsuit. I didn't even know.
Can you just back up a little bit for those who don't know what you're referring to, the Trump call? What does that mean?
So I was called by Trump in February. Emmanuel Macron had visited Trump, and I had done this series about, it was about his wife, Brigitte Macron. And the series got a lot of views, and Emmanuel Macron personally flew to DC and asked Trump to ask me to shut up, to just stop speaking about his wife. And
Did you know this was going to rise to the level of international incident?
No. And it's actually making me go back, and historically I'm thinking, you know, all the times that we were told that a war ended because of this or because of that. If this was one element of negotiation of Emmanuel Macron to Trump, and the topic of why he was, you know, ostensibly there was to discuss the end of the Ukrainian and Russian war, but you're taking Trump aside and you're asking him to shut up this podcaster in the US, I'm wondering if anything that we're told in our history books is real.
So that is exactly right. I have wondered the same. That is just absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a viewer. We know that.
He is a viewer, him and his wife and their entire entourage. They watch every minute of my show. Trump certainly didn't. I know Trump, I think, stays much more in the mainstream media.
Yes.
In terms of watching what he watches. But
he must have been completely confused.
He sounded very confused. He said he was very confused when the leader of France took him aside.
Of a nuclear-armed country.
Mm-hmm, during negotiations for Ukraine and Russia to inquire about whether or not he knew Candace Owens. And clearly it was an emergency, because it wasn't like Trump called me 2 days after or a week after. It wasn't like a side conversation that, oh, let's take care of that. I was messaged by the intermediary hours after Macron left, maybe even an hour after Macron had left, and said, like, we need to get on the phone with you.
The President of the United States.
Well, first, the person said, somebody very close to the President of the United States is asking me to ask you to stop talking about Brigitte's penis. And
This is the true face of diplomacy. I love it.
True face of diplomacy. And I laughed because I said, okay, no, bye. This seems ridiculous. I kind of questioned whether or not it was even true. But I liked the person who called me very much. And I thought maybe I was being a bit short there because I'm 9 months pregnant, and I was at the time, I think 5 or 6 months pregnant. And I tend to get short the more pregnant I become. And so I called him back and I just said, can you explain to me what's really going on? And that individual told me that it was presented to him as a condition of ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. Like, this was something that he brought up in the midst of these negotiations. That's how it was presented to me from a third-party person. And then I was just completely floored. And I just took a second, looked at my husband, and the first thing we said to one another is, no one will ever believe us.
Right.
Like, this is beyond the realm of things that could be plausible. They're going to think I'm making this up and I'm lying. And even when I did eventually tell the story months later, people were like, there's no way that this could have happened. And until Trump didn't deny it. And then, of course, Emmanuel Macron is now suing me, and he included, as a part of a lawsuit, he referred to that phone call and how he believes that presenting it as an element of the Ukraine-Russian war was wrong. Like, he was like, and so he's nitpicking there. But
so what is he suing you over? What does the suit claim?
Well, it claims a lot. It's 200 pages.
200 pages.
200 pages. And what's really interesting is my series was based on a book. I worked with Xavier Poussard, who is a journalist, a very credible journalist in France, who worked on the story for 8 years and ended up having to move his family to Italy because of what Brigitte and her husband, France is a whole different political system.
Certainly is.
And they can just bring charges against you.
It's an authoritarian country run completely by Macron. And they pretend that's not true, but it is true.
It is 1000% true. And so journalists that first got wise to the fact that Brigitte Macron kind of didn't exist for 30 years of her life were harassed by the government. They filed charges against them for, first and foremost, invasion of privacy. So there was never a dispute when she was bringing these charges about. She never brought a charge against people for saying that she was born a man. And that's what should be made clear to everybody. Like, that's not something that they ever say is not true when it comes down to the legality of it all, when they get into courtrooms. But they first sued for invasion of privacy. Then they sued for defamation regarding a statement, an error that the woman had made investigating when she said, in my opinion, this document is fake. But that document actually was real. It was a birth certificate relating to somebody in the story. And so it was remarkably petty. And this is what they do. They get very legalistic. We'll keep you in the courtroom. We'll harass you. And for Xavier, things were happening where it was they wanted him to know they were following him, yes, and that the Secret Service was keeping an eye on him. They never actually brought a suit against him until recently, the same time as mine. They're not suing him for defamation, even though he's the author of the book that I based my entire series on. They are instead suing him for cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying ahead of state?
Mm-hmm. You can do that
I
in
should
Europe.
just say, because it's true, that the French intelligence services, everyone makes fun of France as incompetent and weak, but their intel services are not incompetent or weak. And after probably CIA, Mossad, maybe the Russian intel services, they are feared.
Mm-hmm. And they should be feared.
They are feared. Mm-hmm. They are feared. That they're very competent. They're violent. Documented. They've killed people, and they're nothing to play with, really.
Right. That's why he picked up his family and he moved.
I get it.
And so it was this tremendous act of bravery that he did this. Putting not just his life on the line, but the life of his wife and his children, because the story here was so demented and so twisted. And just also the broader consideration that you could have an entire state colluding to protect a secret of that magnitude. And what's so compelling about this story, and I get into this in the first episode of Becoming Brigitte, is that by the time it made its way to the English-speaking world, people thought that this was like as always, far-right conspiracy dug up from the trenches of Reddit. And that's not what happened at all. The story begins with Emmanuel Macron and his wife is actually the journalists, the left-leaning journalists, the Condé Nast journalists who wanted to celebrate Brigitte,
yes,
wanted to do documentaries on Brigitte. This wonderful woman is now empowered, and what is she going to do? And they were kind of getting threatened. They were told to come to the Élysée Palace, and there was only one person that they could talk to. They couldn't find or verify anything about Brigitte's history or Brigitte's past. And they sort of fell down the hole and were like, I don't know why I suddenly feel like I've done something wrong for asking basic questions about the First Lady of France. And so that's kind of where the series begins, and it kind of takes you through what they went through and what many people have gone through since, just trying to learn anything about the First Lady.
So to be clear, it's an amazing story, and for so many reasons, but for the one that you just described, that this was actually well known in France. It all took place in public, but I don't think 1 in a million Americans had any idea at all until your series came out. And the initial reaction to your series was, well, that now we know Candace is insane. She's really going off the deep end. The wife's a man. Come on now. And then as the series progressed and became one of the biggest podcast series in the country, and sort of sober people were saying, actually, you should listen to this. This is pretty wild, pretty compelling. But I just want to get to the lawsuit. So they're suing you for defamation.
For things that I never said, which is
right.
They know that this lawsuit, this is why I called it a PR strategy. This lawsuit was filed for the press, right? Because she just lost her defamation case against 2 journalists in France. And now everyone was reporting, wait, you said that this was the big case that proved, or you presented it as if you were suing them on this claim of you being a man or a woman. And now you've lost that in France. This is your home territory. What's going on? And so I think she called the lawyers and were like, just file a lawsuit, because it's very sloppy. The points run into one another. First, they argue that I'm doing it for money. Then they make the argument that I was fired for speaking about it. So that doesn't make any sense. It can't be both. And it's a bunch of stuff that I didn't say. They're behaving like mainstream journalists, where they'll take a couple of words that I said, like gangster, criminal and gangster, but then they add their own sentence to it. And they're like, she accused her of being a criminal and a gangster. So it's very sloppy. And what they're doing is they're just biding their time. They don't want the world to look, which this was a very bad mistake, a very bad way to go about it, but they want the world to believe that she has a claim against me, that we're suing, therefore, because this podcaster lied. But it's way too late. I mean, it truly, it's Everyone is aware of what's happened. This only made the series go viral. Now it's going viral in Asia. I'm getting all of these emails from people in China saying this series is going viral. They're not even on YouTube, so I don't know how they're watching it in China. But it was a mistake because obviously now people are going, okay, something must be true. A president of a foreign country does not sue a mom that does her podcast in her basement because she spoke something that was not true. Like there's clearly something that they want hidden. And so everyone's taking a closer look at the series.
Yeah, that's not the way to hide things.
Right.
The way to hide things is say, poor Candace, nice woman, obviously mentally ill. Mm-hmm. Come on now. Mm-hmm. That's the way to do it. And sophisticated liars do that.
Right.
So it is interesting. They're responding in a way that clearly is driven by emotion and fear. That's my read. I don't really know why they're responding, of course, but looking at it, it's so interesting. You may have noticed this is a great country with bad food. Our food supply is rotten. It didn't used to be this way. Take chips, for example. You may recall a time when crushing a bag of chips didn't make you feel hungover, like you couldn't get out of bed the next day. And the change, of course, is chemicals. There's all kinds of crap they're putting in this food that should not be in your body. Seed oils, for example. Now, even one serving of your standard American chip brand can make you feel bloated, fat, totally passive, and out of it. But there is a better way. It's called Masa chips. They're delicious. I've got a whole garage full of them. They're healthy, they taste great, and they have 3 simple ingredients: corn, salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. No garbage, no seed oils. What a relief, and you feel the difference when you eat them, as we often do. Snacking on Masa chips is not like eating the garbage that you buy at convenience stores. You feel satisfied, light, energetic, not sluggish. Tens of thousands of happy people eat Masa chips. It's endorsed by people who understand health. It's well worth a try. Go to Masa, M-A-S-A, chips.com/Tucker. Use the code Tucker for 25% off your first order. That's masachips.com, Tucker. Code Tucker for 25% off your first order. Highly recommended.
And there is something also that the way that they're going about this, going after the journalists, thinking that America is the same sort of a beast as France is, and that, well, we have said that you can't ask us any questions, we'll sue you for cyberbullying. There is something cyberbullying, whatever the claims are here, but there is something about it where once you really arrive at a truth, what I find the reaction is for the people that are incensed by the fact that you're presenting that truth is I'll impoverish you.
Yeah.
And I've seen this over and over again. It's like, okay, she told the truth, but our response to that is going to be demands that she get fired, right? She should lose her livelihood for speaking the truth. She should lose, and that's why Jake Tapper, I don't know if you've seen it, you probably haven't because it's Jake Tapper, but he sits down with Tom Claire, who is a lawyer on this case, and Jake Tapper is doing the absolute most to make this just the easiest interview for Tom Claire. He's sitting across from him and he's like, she's deranged and she's crazy and she's a conspiracy theorist. Much so.
Jake Tapper said that.
Jake Tapper, but so much so that people in the comments were like, now I want to watch the series. His own viewers thought this was just so over the top. But then he turns to Tom Claire and he asks him like a basic question. He's like, what evidence did you present to her that Brigitte's a man? And Tom Claire can't answer the question. He's like, you can read the claims. It's extensive. And, we told her that she was a woman. They never presented any evidence. We went to them before we published the series. We were in touch with Tom Claire of Claire and Locke. We sent them a list of questions. We said, look, we won't even do this series if you answer these basic circle yes or no questions. Was Brigitte Macron, the first lady, born a woman? That basic of questions. Did she ever live as a person named Veronique before the transition? Temporarily, Brigitte lived as a person named Veronique. They refused to answer these yes or no questions. Obviously, if you're going to prove actual malice, you have to present to the court, it's obviously a very high bar that's been set, which I don't necessarily even agree with that bar, by the way, New York Times versus Sullivan set. But obviously, you have to prove that I acted, I knew the truth, and I acted.
That's exactly right.
I was desperate to get to the truth and said I would stop doing this series. We also offered for me to get on a plane and fly to France to interview, to get Brigitte's side of this. I want to make sure I'm not colored by having read Becoming Brigitte and reading the series. There could be another side. And it was essentially a big F you and said, Tom Claire comes back. She doesn't have to answer your questions. She doesn't have to prove to you.
So they retained Tom Claire and Libby Locke then, or Tom Claire. So Tom Claire and Libby Locke are married, second marriage for him. But I know them. And they have a law firm, I believe, in suburban DC and Virginia, and that specializes in making people shut up through intimidation. They tried it with me, and in a really brutal, cruel way, I would say, to try and just scare you into shutting up. So that itself, I don't think anyone regards Tom Claire as a good lawyer at all. But certainly, his behavior is designed to intimidate you. So the fact that they hired them at the outset, that's the behavior of someone who just wants to scare you into shutting up.
And the timing of when they first sent us a letter was actually the end of November of last year. We missed the letter because they sent it to an inbox that we would have never been checking. It was a very weird inbox, where you would go to return a t-shirt. And because we missed that, and I'm glad I missed it because I probably would have been scared. I think they knew, because that was right when I began speaking with Xavier Poussard. And I was in London at the time, and I had agreed to interview him, but nobody knew I was going to do this interview. So what made them suddenly send this intimidating letter?
And Tom Claire sent it?
Tom Claire sent it.
They'd already retained him.
They had retained him, and he sent a letter. And I think that they were monitoring Xavier Poussard. I think they were monitoring either his communications or monitoring him.
How else would they have known?
That he was flying to London to sit down and do an interview with me. And they sent it just a week before I sat down with him.
Well, keep in mind, the subject of your story controls some of the most competent intel services in the world.
Correct.
As a head of state, there are no rules at all, which is enough to make you a little uncomfortable if you think about it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they would hire those two lawyers, by the way, his wife, Libby Locke, is Bill Ackman's lawyer, who Ackman uses to make people shut up.
Interesting.
By sending hysterical letters, screechy letters, threatening to destroy you if you keep talking about the client. I mean, it's really thuggish. Let's just go through, but can we just go through chronologically how this unfolded? So at the core of the story is the allegation that Brigitte Macron is not who she says she is, and that would include her sex, is not what she says it is.
Correct. That she was born a man named Jean-Michel Trogneau. And I'm aware, if you have not watched the series, that sounds crazy, because that was me when I first saw the headline.
Yes. No. I mean...
I was alerted to it by the Daily Mail. I thought it was such a crazy, insane headline, but it was the Daily Mail had published an article saying that with a video of Emmanuel Macron denying claims his wife was a man. And I just thought, that's really funny. What could possibly be going on in France that the president has to deny a claim that his wife's a man? But something that caught my eye was just, as I was reading this article, they made no effort to debunk it. It was sort of it was that typical CNN, New York Times, it's so crazy. It's okay, but if it's so crazy, just, post some photos of her. Obviously, she's got 3 kids. There's got to be tons of photos of her raising her children. There was nothing. They had one solitary photo. And when you look at the photo, it was very obvious, and this is before I got into the details, that she looks a lot more like the little boy that's on the left than she does who they were trying to purport was the little girl that was sitting on the family member's lap. And so I got into it kind of very organically. I was like, this is weird. What's going on in France that the president has to make a comment on the situation? And then I found a website where it explained it, and I instantly realized there is something here. You don't have any photos of yourself for 30 years of your life. And the 2 photos that you've given have been given to the public from a woman who has quite literally been charged with forging documents. She's a thug. Mimi Marchand, they had to eventually get rid of her. Forging documents, thuggery, things of that nature, of a criminal nature. She's the only one. Everyone's going to go through her to get any information about your past. This is so strange. It's so kooky that you wouldn't just... The defense to this is just, hey, could you show us any pictures of your living for these 30 years? You had allegedly 3 children. Did you guys take any photos while you were raising them? Maybe when you were in the hospital? No, Tucker. There's nothing there.
So it's an amazing allegation, a stunning allegation, a bewildering allegation. But I think the legal and the moral question is, did you give an opportunity? Did you give the prime minister and his wife an opportunity, the Macrons, the opportunity to respond to the allegation before the series ran? So that's my question.
Weeks to respond.
And what way did you do that? Did you call them? Did you?
Via Tom Claire. It was their lawyer. So they kind of made a mistake. They messaged us first to kind of intimidate us and say, you're working on this thing or you're talking,
Did they say how they knew you were working on it?
I am not clear, because what was interesting is in that first letter, they included claims of what I said while I was working at the Daily Wire. That was the previous March. So you're responding to something that I said in March. We're now in December. So what triggered you? And clearly it had to have been that I had just interviewed Xavier Poussard and they were aware of it. So then they said, okay, send her out a letter to intimidate her. And obviously getting a letter for most people, you get a letter from a sitting president of France, you're going to go, okay, well, I'm just going to be quiet and not say anything more because I don't want to get involved in this. But for me, it just made me even more curious. And so to be sure, I said, well, I'm glad we have a line of communication established, because I'm certainly not interested in defaming you. I'm not interested in lying. Obviously, I would do myself a disservice if all of this was complete crap. And it turned out that I had been peddling it. So here are my questions. Very simple, yes or no questions. Did you ever live as Veronique? Who is Jean-Michel Trogneau? Refused to answer. They just instantly got...
So you presented the allegation to them, which they, of course, were aware of, that people had made, others, not you, that she's not really who she says she is. Mm-hmm. And you said, can you explain?
Yeah. And honestly, it didn't require much of an explanation. We also asked, can you give us any photos of you living through this 30-year period? I mean, pretty easy stuff. If you're actually concerned and you're going to pretend you're so traumatized and defamed because of this story, I would have been like, yeah, of course, here I am. Here's me in middle school. Here's me on a cheerleading team. Here's me the first day I held my first son. Here's me. It's such an easy thing to debunk that it requires the suspension of common sense to believe that this is a conspiracy theory, because it's so easy to debunk, and yet they refuse to do it. And they're being extremely petty and going after every single person that speaks about it. Now,
have they ever provided that evidence to anybody?
No, that's the point. They haven't.
To this day.
They would have never had to sue anybody, because everyone would have then laughed at them. Like if someone was working on a story saying that I lived as a man for 30 years, I don't need to lawyer up. I want you to publish that story so that I can then come out and say, this person is a psychopath. Clearly, here is the trove of me growing up with my sisters. Here's my middle school yearbook. To the contrary, even when Xavier Poussard, because he has been working on this for 10 years and therefore filing paperwork with the government to get pictures, Jean-Michel Trogneau has a military file. He also filed to get Brigitte's school yearbook, where she's allegedly has a picture, and he won that case and then took it to Sacré-Cœur, which is Sacred Heart, and they said, we're not releasing it. I don't care if you won the case. We're refusing to release this to you. So in every regard, something that would be able to dispel this rumor, even her children, where are your kids in this? If that's my mom and she's so attacked and it's so horrifying that she's got to put, my dad, stepdad on a plane to go speak to the President of the United States, way before then, I would have released pictures of me and my mom. Her kids are all adults. I would have said, here's me and my mom growing up on my first birthday, my second birthday. Please, everyone, leave her alone. They won't do it. It's bonkers to think.
Have the kids spoken in public?
Only one child has ever spoken and called the rumors crazy and upsetting, and that's her youngest daughter, Tefon. And I have a theory about why that is, but again, there's no evidence to supply. Tefon won't go under oath. Tefon won't speak. Tefon won't say, oh no, she just says it's very hurtful and it's not true. And okay, Tefon, well, you have the power to dispel this by just releasing some photos of you growing up. You're a 40-year-old lawyer. It's pretty simple to release some photos of you as a kid with your mom, and they won't do it.
Here's a revealing and unpleasant fact. Mexico is facing a dangerous outbreak of New World screwworm. Ugh. Screwworm is a flesh-eating parasite. It's devastating to livestock and to humans. Ugh. Despite this, the Department of Agriculture has reopened foreign livestock imports, including from Mexico. Does that sound wrong to you? Does it sound revolting? Well, yeah. Our friends at Merriweather Farms agreed. They sounded the alarm on what could clearly be a serious threat to your health. And it worked. After Merriweather's campaign, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins suspended Mexican livestock imports until we can certain that our food supply and our citizens are safe, including from screwworm. So the story tells a lesson, and it asks an obvious question. Why should you rely on untrustworthy foreign beef to feed your nation? The answer is that you shouldn't rely on it. If you agree, we hope you'll support Merriweather Farms. In a time when so many are selling out, they have the courage to stand up for what is right, and all of their meat comes from this country, the United States. We know because we eat it every single day. Visit Merriweather Farms, MERIWETHER farms.com Tucker. Use the code Tucker for 15% off your first order. Real meat, real values, and it's delicious. So it sounds like from what you've said, you don't believe this case was even designed to go forward.
No.
They're not planning on a courtroom showdown here.
No. And there's no way. By the way, I engaged with Libby Locke and Tom Clare a long time ago about defamation, and they told me not to go after it because the bar was so high. And I had a very clear case where someone told a blatant lie about me, which we happily countered right away.
You've dealt with them before.
Yeah. Oh, I have emails from, this is the funny part, I have emails from them. I love you, adore you, watch your show.
They're totally soulless, both of them.
Yeah, clearly.
Yes.
The motive here is money, which is fine if that's what you want your legacy to be, because at the core of this case, which most people should be speaking about, is their defense here is I am admitting, which they've never done before, they've now admitting that Emmanuel Macron was only 14 when they met, when he was in that play, 15, she says, whenever this affair happened. And in my suit, they admit that Emmanuel Macron's parents took him away from the school because of this relationship. Do you understand how the audacity of, I'm a creep, I macked on a student at best, and I have the audacity to file this lawsuit? I mean, what is going on in France that you would so willfully put that in a lawsuit, which, by the way, debunks their earlier claims. When he was first running, the press said he was 17. Then when Xavier Poussard proved that wasn't true, then suddenly they were saying he was 16. Now we've got them writing that he was 15. But the truth is that Emmanuel Macron was 14. And they can't go back on that truth because she has...
Isn't that child molestation?
There we go. That's another big thing happening here. She's desperate now to keep it at 15. Brigitte wants to keep it at 15. No, he was 14 when he was in that play that she says that she watched him in. As you know, 14-year-old boys, I guess as a 40-year-old woman, you would just be so swept away by a 14-year-old child on stage. He was in this play. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a French name, Mila Kundera's play. And that's when she alleges that she saw him and he just was... ahead of his time, a savant, so brilliant in his demonstration, his ability to act.
He's a little kid.
He's a child. He's a child, and this is a very creepy, sadistic story. And the more that you learn how much the press lied about that earlier story, I mean, even the press in the beginning, when he was running, even said that Brigitte Macron was this like irresistibly hot teacher. Like they kept comparing her to Claudia Schiffer. And then when Xavier and these journalists got documents and like, you know, pictorial evidence of what Brigitte looked like at that time, she looked like a man in the middle of a transition, you know? And so even that, I mean, the way the press lied to sell this creepy relationship is something that should concern everyone, whether you believe she's a man or not. What you have is a couple that is willfully getting away with, at best, like molestation, sexual perversion,
he runs
deviance, and he runs the country.
This is not some random guy.
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
And that's not in dispute.
No, that's not. It was in dispute because they tried to at first say that he was 17. Now she's saying 15. The truth is Emmanuel Macron was 14.
I'll just go with 15 and say that's wrong.
Yeah, right? Do we even need to... And
well, I mean, 15. I mean, that's a whole different thing.
And that was the comments under Jake Tapper's interview with Tom Clare. People, and this is the left, this is his show, were outraged. They were going, how could you defend this? I asked the question to Tom Clare on my show as I unpacked all of the child molestation that surrounds them. It's an entire orbit of people who have been found guilty and have openly admitted to molesting their children. These are their friends, okay? That's why she's angry, because I'm like, it's not just them. It's this guy, this guy, this guy. He funded the campaign, then had to come out and say, yes, I molested my stepson, and the stepdaughter wrote a book about it. A person admitted to that.
And these are friends of the Macrons?
Oh, yeah. Their current lawyer, okay, who was the finance minister. Brigitte handpicked him to be the finance minister of France. His name is Eric Dupond-Moretti. This was my episode 2 days ago. Of course, because everyone in their orbit just, I don't know, has an interesting pedophilia story.
Do you have any friends who are pedophiles?
None. They just can't stop finding friends that are somehow involved in these crazy pedophilia scandals. And Eric Dupond-Moretti made a name for himself as the lawyer that comes in on behalf of the offending. In this case, it's almost always incest, by the way, in all of the cases that he involves himself in. And he convinces the court, as he did in one certain case called the Manouche affair, that, okay, yeah, it is incest. Yeah, he's been raping his daughter, but, and this is what he's famous for, it's happy incest. And he sold to a court and got this guy sentence reduced. He had been raping 2 of his daughters.
Come on.
I'm not kidding. You can look this up on Wikipedia, no less. And he sold this to the court, coined the phrase, along with another person who, another lawyer who Emmanuel awarded the Medal of Freedom to. And they said to the court in Amiens, which is where Brigitte and Emmanuel are both born, that you should release this guy because he loves his daughter. And now she's 21. And so it doesn't really matter. And honestly, it's the mom's fault. They encouraged them to all sleep together. And so they did. They released him early. And then his daughter tried to escape him and he killed her. So this is the guy who's on the news channels right now saying, we're going to go after Candace Owens because this is a state affair. And he's got this whole glorious story about how I'm being funded by Russia. Because it's always Russia, as we all know. It's got to be Russia.
Funded by Russia?
His theory was
This feels like the kind of end stage of something.
Yep.
I hate the phrase global elite because it sounds so spooky or whatever, but that's what it is.
The depraved. I don't even call them the elite. They're the depraved, and they've just been running the game for so long that they're not even getting creative anymore.
But there's always a part of town with depraved people. Like every society has the depraved, the depraved community. But has there been since Rome really a whole class of depraved people with this much power? That's what gets me.
I think so. Yeah. The more that I study and the more that I take a look at this picture, because at first, you go through this period where you're going, am I crazy or are they all defending like children being raped? Like this can't be right. Like somebody's going to stand up and say something. And the only thing that you can do in those moments where you're questioning whether or not this could be the circumstance is to educate yourself further.
Yes.
And I find that whatever area they have sort of an inordinate response to, where they're like getting very angry about something that seems so simple, is probably where you should press your thumb the hardest. And I did this with like Sigmund Freud. I kind of said something on my show about how like Sigmund Freud was like a pervert and getting into children and incest, his whole theory, blaming the children for their parents being incestuous. And the reaction across the press, like, how dare she? I'm like, he's dead. Why are you defending this guy?
Not American.
He did present a theory that these children who were being raped by, by their fathers were actually attracted to them. Why are you defending this? And then I got educated about it and started reading books and stunned. Like, yes, this is actually something that he was doing. And I learned this from the person who controlled the Sigmund Freud archives, who wrote this amazing book called The Assault on Truth. But there is this common thread that it brings you back to Paris every time, whether you're talking about Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, talking about Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte, you're talking about Sigmund Freud. He studied and then came up with this theory while he was studying under Charcot in Paris, that actually, even though we see all this evidence that these kids are being raped, it is their fault because they're attracted to their fathers. And for this guy who rang the alarm on this, like years later, he was working with Anna Freud and he was in control of the archives. His name is Jeffrey Masson. He got kicked out of the archives for telling the truth.
Very, very famous case.
Oh yeah, he got kicked out. But he wrote the book still because he still had the letters. He published the letters to prove that Sigmund Freud knew for a fact these kids were being raped. And
boy, was he attacked for that too.
But here's what's interesting about that. He publishes that book, The Assault on Truth, and Anna allowed him to, because she could have stopped the book, and Anna Freud chose not to stop the book. I think she wanted the secret to be out. But you go through these stories, and over again, you get this theme of this very dark theme of children that are being raped, right? And it's incestuous. Like I said, while they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, like, why do we keep coming back to this theme? And why does it seem that the media is colluding to cover that up? Like, I thought no matter where we were on the spectrum, left or right, like when it came to children, whether it's murder, rape, like we all were on the same page that like we have to defend innocent lives. And so then you have to press further and go, what is the theology here? Because everything, as my husband has taught me, is a theology. They're being guided by a theology. And while the rest of the world is being driven towards either being agnostic or being outwardly atheistic, I think the people that are in control are being pulled by...
Oh, they're not atheists.
They're not atheists at all.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. One of my smarter children said to me today, actually, said child molestation is the only crime with no justification. And I had never thought of it that way. And it's like murder, of course, murder's wrong. Of course, there's plenty of circumstances where I can imagine committing murder and going to hell for it. But I mean, I can imagine, getting so mad that I shoot somebody, or, you know what I mean? Stealing, lying. But it's not possible to imagine a justification for molesting a child, for being sexual with a child. And it's also not possible to imagine for all the sins that I can imagine committing in a certain circumstance, like That's just, I can't even get my head around it. That's just not appealing in any way. Like you'd never even think of wanting to do that. So it's got to be spiritual. You don't want to be passive and tired and dependent, do you? Of course you don't. You want to be strong and self-sufficient. That's the goal, and our friends at Beam can help you. They understand that real strength does not come from drugs. It comes from inside you, internal motivation, internal strength. Health, that's the key. Bigger. So we partner with Beam because they have the same values that we have, that Americans have: hard work, accountability, free will, independence. Be strong, don't be dependent. Not until you're really old anyway. Beam can help you achieve that. This great U.S. company is offering our listeners a new bundle, the American Strength Bundle. And it comes with top-selling creatine and protein powder that delivers what your body needs to perform, to recover, and to stay strong. No junk at all. All natural ingredients that actually taste good. You will love it. You can get 30% off this bundle at shopbeam.com/Tucker. This is not in stores, just on that page for people who listen to this podcast only. They're encouraging you to be weak. Don't let them. Go to shopbeam.com/Tucker for 30% off.
It is spiritual for them. And that's why studying Sigmund Freud, and I realized why they were so triggered when I'm always a person like accidentally lands on something and then there's just like this reaction.
Yes.
And like, you can't do that. And then I go, okay, well, I better learn about that because there's something you don't want me to know. And so now I'm curious. If they would just leave me alone, I promised I wouldn't even have come down this path. But what you learn about Sigmund Freud is that what he actually mainstreamed, I mean, the psychoanalytic movement was quite literally a movement to mainstream gaslighting. And this is no question. Like I said, you can read Sigmund Freud's archives. This guy was not a guy theorizing that this is what was going on. He had access, learned German, read the archives, alerted Anna Freud and was like, hey, did you know your dad knew that these kids were being raped, and yet he lied to the public? And she's like, yeah, I think, please maybe don't publish that. But then she let him publish it. And I think that was a cry for help, but that's my theory. Anyways, the second book to read was once you get to that and you go, what is this guiding theology? Why did Sigmund Freud at first acknowledge, as he did, openly that all of these kids were being raped because he was at the morgue? Some of these kids were dying because of their injuries. And he was at the morgue in Paris. He saw this up front. There was no dispute. The literature has been published. He's studying under Charcot, and then he does this pivot suddenly when he turns 35, and he says, "Never mind, these kids are not being abused. They're attracted to their fathers.
They're the sexual provocateurs."
David Bakan published a book, and he relates it to, and he makes a very sound argument, and then proves his theory that it's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish mystical tradition. And he relates it to the Kabbalah, this sort of Gnostic idea that you have to descend into hell and then you will be brought up. And like the worst thing that you could possibly do, the worst sin, they believe in this idea of holy sin, is to harm a child. Now, again, these people that I'm citing, just because I know that you start talking about Sigmund Freud and anti-Semitism, these people who wrote these books are both Jewish. Jeffrey Masson is Jewish. He's an Ashkenazi Jew. David Bakan is an Ashkenazi Jew. These people are professors and, they have the credentials here to make these conclusions. And what he theorizes in this book is that Sigmund Freud was mainstreaming the Kabbalah through psychoanalytics. And the reason why he waited until he was 35, as he explains, is that in the Kabbalah tradition, they think it's so powerful, whatever the Kabbalah is. And I'm not educated on the Kabbalah, I will admit that. But whatever it is, they don't tell their kids about it until they turn 35. And when Sigmund Freud was 35, he received a Hebrew Bible from his father. And it's like, I guess they believe in numerology, whatever it is. And he was suddenly awakened to whatever aspect of the Kabbalah that it was. After David Bakan published the book, a rabbi came to him. He got in touch with the rabbi and spoke to this rabbi who told him that, yes, Sigmund Freud was a Kabbalist because he knew him personally, and he had a Zohar in his apartment or in his place, and he then verified that his theory, as reading through his papers, was correct and that he was a Kabbalist. And so I think it's important for people, as I started a book club, to read these books. Like, don't take it from me. And I always say, yeah, we need to stop falling for this credentialism. You shouldn't listen to me because I'm Candace Owens and I have a podcast. I want you to read these same books and to recognize that something very wrong is happening in this world. And when we point to these facts, we're all being gaslit. Like, we're suddenly being told that having a response, as just one example to right now, to like kids dying in Gaza makes us monsters. Well, Sigmund Freud is the person that introduced the idea of sort of this, that gaslighting could be an effective strategy.
And gaslighting, as I understand it, is the process of inverting blame.
Mm-hmm.
So I punch you in the face and attack you for assaulting me. How dare you hit me?
Right.
So,
and it feels like we're constantly being gaslit.
Well, it does feel like there's an awful lot of blame shifting. I see it in a very different context, but just on economics. It's like, the working class of the United States has been like completely under assault. It's not accidental. They were kind of targeted for extinction and treated with maximum contempt. And then they're like blamed for their medieval attitudes. They're all racist or whatever. It's like, no, actually, I think they're the ones who aren't winning. They seem to be losing out in a deal that is making a lot of other people rich. Why are we attacking them?
Well, then you get called a racist, right? You get called a racist for noticing that. And these people who are like, I just want to be able to feed my families and go to work and feel good about that.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with race. Like, how did race become part of this? It's like, what?
But that's an element of that. And one of the things to recognize about Freud is that, so the Freud family creates a psychoanalytic movement, Sigmund Freud does, and they're gaslighting people. But then that turns into modern propaganda because it's the Freud Bernays family. It's the same family. Edward Bernays is the person that created propaganda during World War II, the OSS. Like, they were using him to figure out how can we mainstream, like how can we convince an entire population to want to go to war, to hate Germans. This is the guy that they brought in. So it's the same, the psychoanalytic movement then turns into propaganda with Edward Bernays and then turns into PR. Like, the biggest PR person in the world right now is still the Freud family. The Freud family are the PR for the royals. His name is Matthew Freud. So you can draw a direct line in understanding that
I think Matthew Freud was married to Rupert Murdoch's daughter.
That is true. That is correct. And so it's very interesting to...
just noting.
Yeah. And it's important for people to recognize this, though. These people have had a tremendous head start, okay? They know how the mind works. They have run these experiments on people. They have had this relationship with the state forever. In fact, I think they are the state, if I'm being honest. They are the state. I shouldn't even say it's a relationship with the state. And what they are constantly trying to do is to infect your mind. Okay, so picture you being that, child who lived through this horrific experience. And now you have an adult sitting before you and saying that never happened and you're crazy. And what's wrong with you is that you're like attracted to your dad. That's what they're doing to all of us in a certain way. Obviously, way more devastating when it happens to a child in that regard, in that sinister regard. But when you see the mainstream media apparatus today, and they're gaslighting us. Like the case of Brigitte Macron is the most gaslighting I've ever seen in my life, where it's just like, you could debunk this in 1 second, but you won't. And you're calling us deranged, and you're calling us crazy, and you're calling us anti-Semitic for caring about a dead Palestinian kid. And it's like, they created this system. And the only way that we're going to be able to defeat it is we have to first understand it. And that's why I really encourage people to get educated. And I just made it my point, because I constantly kept getting this claim, like, anti-Semitic, talk about Sigmund Freud. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm only going to read Israeli historians and I'm only going to read Jewish books that are written by Jewish authors, so that we can just go ahead and dispel the rumor.
I've never heard that. It's interesting. Sigmund Freud has gone in and out of style. Well, he was very in style when I was young. And then...
Same for me. He was very in style.
Yes. And then he was really knocked off the pedestal by feminists, as I recall, because he had like some non-fashionable views on women and calling them hysterical, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't recall Sigmund Freud being like a protected figure. Since when is criticizing him a hate crime?
That's what was so weird to me. I did one episode on the Daily Wire.
I don't think he was a religious guy, at least.
Exactly. I did one episode and I was speaking about also all of his friends. His best friend was this guy, Wilhelm Fliess, who his son came out, Robert Fliess, and said, my father sexually assaulted me. Everyone surrounding him was like sexually assaulting their children in Vienna, which is...
Again, what is that? I mean, I feel like I've been everywhere, know a ton of people. I've never met anyone who's been accused of molesting his own child. That is so far out. I've known people who've done every bad thing, and I've never met anybody who's even been accused of that. Yeah. And yet you're describing two clusters of people, powerful people, famous people, where like tons of people in the orbit have been accused of or have in fact committed child molestation.
Well, let me just tell you, as you get into my series, like as I point to all this orbit around them of everyone who just keeps accidentally committing pedophilia, defending pedophilia, whatever it is, the best part is for me that they kind of laugh in your face. Like they want you to know that there's an element of it that's partially sadistic. Presidential Portrait Emmanuel Macron leaning against a desk. Everybody has to do this, leaning against a desk, obviously, the official presidential portrait.
Yes.
He chooses to put a book, and he has in multiple interviews said it's his favorite author, by André Gide on the table. André Gide is an author who admitted openly that he was a pedophile. He's a pederast. He specifically only actually molests little boys. And he would go down to Algeria, Morocco, and he would write books based on his experiences. The president of France chose to put that book, okay, an André Gide book, on his desk for his official presidential portrait. Like there was no other book that you could have picked to put there. There's an element of it where I think that they've amassed so much power. And it's quite interesting because I think maybe Daryl Cooper told you about this, but getting into Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr,
Yes.
who wrote that weird book.
Yes.
The space, it's called Space Relations by Donald Barr, where he predicts a colony of Khazars, as he calls them, Khazars, Kossars, he spells it, that are so bored with their power. They're so bored with being elite, just getting away with everything, you know? And he then predicts kind of in this fantasy book, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's very strange. Got it. And he also was, in the OSS, which was the precursor for the CIA. But there's an element of that when I see Emmanuel Macron engaging in that it's like they want to get caught and they just have so much power that they know that there's never going to be any consequences for it, where you go, why would you do this? You could have put any other book on your desk. You could have put literally any other book on your desk, but you chose a self-admitted, never denied the fact that he would go down to Morocco, and he just was into little boys.
So we're in the nicotine business. We make Alp pouches and they're delicious. But one thing about nicotine, it is regulated by the federal government up one side and down the other. And the main thing you can't do, no matter how much scientific evidence exists, is make a health claim about nicotine. So we don't. But that is not true with caffeine. Caffeine is good for you. So we've come up with a better way to use caffeine. It's called Coffee Break. It's designed for people who want to think clearly, move quickly, never miss a beat. It is delicious and it's strong, and it is best paired with an Alp. Each XL pouch hits with 50 milligrams of caffeine. Roll out of bed and start your day on the most vigorous possible note. Ready to dominate.
So this is all of everything that you've said for the past 20 minutes makes me think they'd be crazy to bring this to trial, because that would allow you discovery.
I think they're banking on us dismissing it. I think one of two options.
It, what does that mean?
You can at first file to dismiss the case because you're going, hi, we have the First Amendment right. This is crazy. It's coming from Paris. I mean, like, why on earth would we honor this at all? Secondly, it's like, are we really going to allow the French president to come in here and like stifle my right to speech? And typically in a normal scenario, a judge would dismiss this case because it's completely crazy. And we can obviously then produce the evidence that we asked them these questions and they chose not to reply to them for whatever reason. I think they want us to dismiss it. And again, I'm guessing just so they can say, oh, well, we tried. But, America has its own beast and they have actual malice. Or they are going to pretend that Brigitte died from grief. I don't know. Because clearly they're not going to go through discovery, right? If you were going to go through discovery, you would have just published pictures a long time ago and put an end to all the rumors, right? Because then you're going to have to give me proof of this 30-year period where you just kind of.
So you're not going to try to have the case dismissed?
I certainly do not want to have the case dismissed.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I've never heard that
we're having these discussions.
Guys, I just want to linger on this for a moment, having been around a lot of lawsuits. I've never heard anybody sued, particularly they're spending a lot of money on this. Because Tom Clare and his wife have big expenses and I think they charge a lot. I've never heard anybody say, I don't want a well-funded case against me to be dismissed.
It's how I feel. And the reason that I feel that way truly, amazing. Tucker, is because
you're being serious.
Is so much bigger. And we're having those discussions. We've spoken to the lawyer. We want it moved to Tennessee. They filed in Delaware. What's happening here is so much bigger and so much more important for the world.
Delaware, really?
Yeah, which is interesting. Hunter kind of notoriously said, like, we control the courts in Delaware. But
Fox News found out. Absurd case against Fox News by Dominion. I was not named in it. I got sucked into it. But Tom Clare was involved in that case, and it was in Delaware. and they just had a completely compliant judge. It was just a joke, actually.
Well, that's very interesting because they did file in Delaware, and it is a place where we know that the courts are corrupt, but this would be a kind of precedent that would be, I think, almost even too crazy for Delaware. You're talking about a sitting president of another country coming in and saying, I'm going to sue you for telling the truth. We have truth on our side, right? We actually have truth. So unless he's going to say, blah, 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 I'm not looking at anything and you're going to get no discovery and we're just going to award this person. I mean, you got to give the other side discovery, right?
How does Macron collect, as a foreign head of state, how does he collect?
There is nothing that we can look at. We are pioneering this, obviously, because this has never happened in the history of the world that a sitting president of a foreign country has sued a journalist and a podcaster in another country. It's never happened. So we don't know. I didn't even know how we could sue, actually. I thought that you could only sue in a country. I just am learning with everybody else.
It's amazing
how this is going to work. But again, speaking of Tom Clare and Dominion, as he was sitting up there giddy with Jake Tapper, as these representatives of like the state, because that's what they represent. They represent the state and the state thuggery.
They always represent the state.
But they're giddy talking about Dominion. Because Jake Tapper sits to him, he's like, and how much did you get from Dominion lawsuit? That's a lot of money. You're going to sue her for all that money. And that tells you who their master is, right?
Oh, I think we knew.
These people are satanic, right? That you can't beat me in the arena of truth and facts. So what do you do next? Well, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to destroy your livelihood. You're going to have nothing to your name. And that's why I say this case matters so much more to me, because we can't have this sort of behavior coming from people that are governing us, right? That say, even if you find the truth, even if I am a pervert, even if I got away with sleeping with my student, even though his parents try to take him away, there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm going to impoverish you for even telling people. Like, that's what this lawsuit is. I'm going to impoverish you for telling the truth. And they're happy. You got to see, they're like, he's like giddy discussing it. And then he turns in the camera, Jake Tapper, and goes, Fox News did this. And how much money did you get? Like, it's totally bizarre. I'm like, that's your master. And you're going to come up against a hard rock here, because I don't care about money. If I hope the story of Candace Owens over the last 2 years, people have come to understand that money is not my master.
I think that's very obvious to everyone. What's interesting, though, since I know everybody you're talking about, is you're the happiest person by far. And I don't mean to be like fake pious or whatever, like the good guys win in the end, but it is true that you can tell who's speaking truth by who is calm and happy. It is true.
Yeah.
Lying makes you afraid, brittle, angry. It does. I've lied before. It makes me afraid, brittle, and angry. And the more you tell the truth, the calmer you are.
Right.
I just think that's real. And anyway, I don't think in the end you win siding with the state against the truth teller.
No, and that's why I asked that question. Like, Tom, I know you've watched every minute of the series. You know that they are surrounded by these people. You know about the children victims that have been silenced. Is it really worth it?
You said that to him?
Yeah, on my podcast. I just said I have to openly, as we went through this Manouche affair and this woman ending up dead because they fought to like get this pedophile and creature in Amiens released. I just asked him, like, is it really worth it? Like, because for me, I couldn't look at a case that involved the abuse of children, or a network of people who are involved with the abuse of children, who have admitted to abusing children, who are defending people who have admitted to abusing children, and put my head on the pillow at night. And that's what matters most. In everything that I do, I have to be able to put my head on the pillow at night and say, I feel like I did what I thought was the right thing to do, and it was a good thing to do.
Yes.
And most people are not guided by that. They're guided by this master of money, right? And they're willing to do these sorts of things to look the other way because you're going to cash a check. Like you and Libby are going to cash a check and like, that's going to be good. Do you want that to be your legacy? I ask him that genuinely. Like, I hope that we do get to court and I get to ask him that face to face. Maybe he's deposing me and I get to ask him, like, is the money worth it? I just want to know. I need to know that, because I could never, when it comes to children, I will breathe fire on Tom Clare before I would sign up to knowingly aid people who have harmed children.
Having sat in a long deposition with Tom Clare, I can tell you, the game is to make you mad. And that's very easy with me because I'm a hothead. It probably won't work with you. You seem to have way more emotional control than I do. But I do think I don't want to be mean, but I just want to say, when people have in mind, when Shakespeare wrote about lawyers, and I'm like, ooh, that's a little harsh. Kill all the lawyers. What are you doing? he had Tom Clare in mind. He really is a discredit to the profession. I can say
or
that.
Or a credit to the profession. Or a credit.
If maybe, I was legit, I mean, the godfathers of my children are lawyers, you know, and really good. My college roommates, really good guys, great guys, men of integrity, true integrity with wives who respect them, kids who love them, and just good men. But if I was a lawyer, if I was one of them, and Tom Clare is stalking the earth, I'd be like, man, we got to disbar that guy because he discredits the entire profession.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I don't know what is guiding him at this point, but it is definitively not goodness, right?
It's definitely not.
Does he think he can win? I know he doesn't, because like I said, I got advice from their law firm not to pursue a defamation claim. So you're in this, to help bolster their idea to the world that they haven't done anything when you know that they're lying, when you know that your client is lying and you still represent them. I don't know how people put their head on the pillow at night. And what's interesting about me, and he'll just come up against a rock, is I have nothing to hide, right? If I had anything to hide, you guys would have found out last year, right? Where I went through and physically felt like an X-ray from the press as they tried to destroy everything that I had, everything that I held dear. I mean, it was nonstop. I mean, banned from Australia, demanding that my speaking events get canceled because I'm an anti-Semite, fired in front of the world. I mean, last year was really one for the books, and anything that they could find on me, they wrote articles about, and they smeared me and they libeled me. And the idea was to kill me. It was like, lay it dead. This girl should no longer have a career. And I survived it. And I survived it because I had the one thing that they couldn't quite kill, which is truth on my side. I told the truth, okay? So at the end of the day, it takes so much more energy and persistence to lie. You have to lie repeatedly. You have to keep telling the person that the shadows on the wall are real, And when you tell the truth, you really just have to say it once. And
it hangs in the air and it resonates and people can feel that it's real.
Mm-hmm. And so they were unsuccessful in trying to destroy me, to try to destroy everything I've ever worked for in my entire life with smears and libels and lies. And so what's left? What is he going to say to me? What are you saying to me during a deposition? Yeah, I think that's a man. And I think that everyone around them is way too close to pedophilia. And I think, Tom Clare, that you should be ashamed of yourself and any person that would ever launch a defense knowing that children were hurt in the process. I think, you better hope karma's not real.
Have you ever talked to McCrone, texted? He texts people, I happen to know.
I wish he would text me. I'd love to speak to him. I view him as a victim, by the way. Okay. You are a child and your drama teacher, whatever, is macking on you and you're 14 years old. I don't know what McCrone has lived through, but when you get into his backstory, it's very weird as well. It's a very weird backstory, a lot of holes in the backstory. And he is, to me, like a Zelensky. He's totally powerless. There's somebody in the shadows telling him what to do. One of the more fun things learning about McCrone is the press sold him as this savant, he's just, he's so brilliant and he was ahead of his time. He needed to sell this creepy relationship. The 14-year-old was ahead of his time. And he came across like a 60-year-old. I don't know what we're doing, right? That's weird. But what was really funny was that he then starts to work for Rothschild's Bank. And before he went to Rothschild's Bank, he went to this school. I don't know how to give you a tit for tat with America. Let's just call it he kind of pursued his master's. And nobody knew how he got into the school. He actually didn't get into the school twice. And then he gets into the school and they take this test and he graduates. He passes with flying colors at the top of the class. And the class revolted because they all knew he was dumb. And they knew that there was a fix in for McCrone. And so they just canceled test scores that year for the first time in the school's history because the kids were suddenly going, there's no way this person got this grade. Same thing happens when he goes to Rothschild Bank. They said, and this is again, according to a Wall Street Journal book, I only use mainstream sources, that everyone who worked with him said he was an absolute idiot. They had no idea why he was at this bank, except for the fact that David Rothschild's hand was on him. They basically, he was allowed to be in these rooms. He didn't even know what IBIDA stood for, but he worked for Rothschild Bank. And they said that it was just very clear that the hand of Rothschild was on him. And so they would all just remark to themselves, how are we working with this guy who's an absolute idiot? So even the idea of McCrone being this sophisticated, brilliant banker who was ahead of his time is just not real. If the mainstream media sources are to be believed. Again, this was a book that was done by the Wall Street Journal, and they sourced people that worked with him and said that he was an absolute idiot, which mirrored exactly what the people who went to school with him said when they had to cancel test scores because of his fake scores.
What's the relationship between Macron and Justin Trudeau? They just remind me of each other. They seem like they're from the same factory line assembly, World Economic Forum.
Macron is very clearly a homosexual. I think that's very obvious. People have come out and talked about sleeping with him. Men, he's never sued them for anything. Very weird.
Men, really?
Oh yeah, right when he became president, there was and I'm blanking on his name. He came out and spoke and said, this guy is, watch out for Macron. He's got some issues. Like he said that he was a part of a sex party with him. Macron never disputed it. And since he likes to sue for defamation, that would have been a pretty good one to go after if a guy is saying he slept with you and that you have mental issues, like that he's like almost like a masochist in many ways. But if you just kind of look at the world right now, a lot of theater boys are getting power. Zelensky was an actor and a performer, and he actually played the role of being the president and then actually became the president. Macron, he was a theater boy, okay? And now all of a sudden he's like playing the part of the president of France. I don't take any of these people seriously. Like
as people.
This is your next act. Yeah, you are told to pretend that you're the president of France and somebody behind you is telling you what to do. And we can definitely, as Americans now, I think we can all agree, whether you're left or right, that is a circumstance after having Biden in office, because we know, irrespective of whether you loved him or hated him, that he was not cognitively there. Right. And yet the government still ran. And that should terrify you. Who was in control?
Well, exactly.
While he was on a steep cognitive decline. It's the same for, I think, the entire Western world, that these people are not in real control, and that they are just made to kind of delude the public into believing that this is a republic and a democracy and you have a say and look, you elected this person, but somebody else is obviously pulling the strings.
That's a fascinating observation that has never occurred to me, that the theater kids have taken, like literally.
Yeah, they're literal theater kids.
That's just.
Here's your next role. You're going to be president.
So, speaking of theater, I just hesitate even to ask this, but because it just opens up all this stuff I don't want to deal with. But you just interviewed Nick Fuentes.
I did,
or had a conversation with him. What did you think of that? What do you think of him?
I mean, I can tell you my experience was entirely fraudulent with him. I never interview people as a gotcha interview. It's always just that he was making the rounds. He's been around for a while, and kind of his story, when I learned it, because he was banned from everywhere, so I didn't actually know what the backstory was with Nick Fuentes, but then I learned it when he was allowed back on X, and Jeremy Boring, who was then the CEO of Daily Wire, did this X live with him. And
Jeremy Boring did an event with Nick Fuentes?
It was weird. Everything was weird about what happened, but it happened. And Nick told his story, and I was listening in, and said essentially that he was canceled because he started asking questions about Israel. He was 18 years old, and he alleged that it was, very much the fault of the Daily Wire or whatever he said. And I found it very interesting. And I was like, oh, I actually didn't know this was the backstory. Maybe this really is a person who had, just ahead of everybody else, was questioning Israel and had like a bad hand given to him. So I had him on the show, welcomed him into my home, and he was very nice. We told him, we're going to cut a controversial trailer. We're going to show you like these clips of you talking trash about me, and you can talk about whatever you want for as long as you want. Ask any questions you want to ask. It went great. He left. He said, thanks. We can now be friends. And I am not kidding. We published this 11 days later, and I don't even know how to, he just starts screaming, calling me an effing bitch, who set him up. We didn't edit a single thing. Those 11 days, like 2 weeks before we even published the interview, we told him if there's anything that he wanted us to insert. Like, nobody does that if you go on their show.
Yes.
And I genuinely don't know what triggered him, other than me at the very end asking him about or talking to him about family. And it was just the rage that was coming out of him was just weird. And I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he did a 180. You had access to me. You could have said anything after. Even if he had said in good faith, I thought I sounded a little weird here, could you cut it out? We probably would have cut it out, because I just don't want people to ever not have a good experience coming on our show.
That.
You know what I'm saying?
And also, you want people, I'll speak for myself. When I invite someone on, especially just to hear their views, I want them to be able to express what they actually think.
Right. Exactly.
And you decide what you think, and you decide how to express it. I mean, that's like a basic human right, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I'm not here to trip you up into saying something you don't mean. I want to hear what you do mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So,
and he told the story. He did all of that. And apparently then, and I don't know if it was driven by insecurity. He didn't know how his followers would take the interview, but he just did a complete 180, lied to his audience, pretended that he was surprised it was behind a paywall. We spoke about him and how we were going to release it. He said, great. I mean, it's a total 180 flip. So I can now say that I didn't listen to other people say that Nick was a bad person. I didn't care about what happened when he was 18, 19, 20, 26. I sat across from a person, had a conversation with him. He behaved one way in person and then put on a show for the internet. So I actually can say my experience with Nick Fuentes is that he's a terrible person and a terrible human being, because why would you do that? There's no reason to do that.
I agree.
You could have come back onto the show. You could have had beginning of us discussing various topics. I think in many ways, whatever happened to him was when he was 18 may have stunted his growth, meaning that he now is responding to the internet, which is filled with people that don't even use their real names. Right? So really, truly, the irony of it all is you could just be like the IDF soldiers just pretending to be his supporters and just getting him to say whatever you want because he's going to do whatever you say. But it was strange. It was totally strange. It made no sense.
And I just went, have a family or a normal life?
I asked him about that. He said, yeah, it comes from a 2-parent household. That's what he told me.
No. Does he have his own family? Does he?
No, he's not married. And I just offered to him, I was like, I think these are things that you learn when you're married. And he just was vicious about it. And,
about
women
what?
Don't tell me what to do or whatever it was. And it was very performative. Like I said the exact same thing to Andrew Tate months earlier. I had him and I said, you should get married. Here's why. And of course, Andrew Tate did not react like that. He told me what his hangups were about marriage. It was just a part of two people communicating on a show. But for whatever reason, he saw this as like an attack, even though.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was weird. It was totally weird.
Tender spot. Well, okay, has it occurred to you that, and I just want to say, I haven't watched a lot of Nick Fuentes in my life at all, but what I've seen, the guy's very talented. Like, just as a, well, let me just say this, as someone who's talked to cameras his whole life, it is very hard to sit and just like riff for 20 minutes. And I think it's an amazing skill, and he has that skill. But I also have noticed, that his targets are all people who are sincere, non-crazy, non-hateful opponents of neocon politics.
Right.
So you have to kind of wonder about that. So Nick Fuentes is like, I don't like the neocons. But then his targets are J.D. Vance, Joe Kent. He got involved in Joe Kent's campaign with a super, yes. You, me. And it's like, what is that?
Dave Smith.
I
asked him about that because that's a question that I had. So I did the right thing by asking him to his face, what's up with this? Like, why do you attack Dave Smith? You say that like your biggest critique is that America's being controlled by Israel. Then you have Dave Smith, who has been such a sound voice. And by the way, opposite experience with Dave Smith. I have my podcast. He's a fantastic human being. I judge
Dave
people.
Smith is one of the nicest people
Fantastic
ever.
human.
Yes.
And so I judge people according to my experiences with them. And so Nick is being judged according to my experience with him.
But like, what is this?
I don't get
Where
it.
does
I don't
the funding come from? I probably shouldn't even say this, but the only reason I know who he is because someone sent me a video a few years ago of him attacking me. And I was like, so I'm looking at this. And I'm like, well, first of all, this kid's really talented, like legit. And I can assess that just having done the job for so long. So I was like, wow, lots of talent, native talent. And he's attacking my dad as a CIA, his dad's in the CIA or whatever. And I'm like, well, that's untrue. Then my father dies and I learn actually, was involved in that world. I was completely shocked by it. So no one has to believe me, but that's just a fact.
Right.
This was in March of this year. And I'm like, well, how the hell would this child from Chicago, my dad was 84 when he passed. Like, who does this guy know who my dad is? And like, he's in intelligence. Well, how would he know that? And
Wait, so that was his critique of you? Because I didn't see it.
Someone just sent me this video and it was like, you can't believe anything Carlson says because his father was in the CIA and he's a CIA working on behalf of the CIA. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, and I actually feel emotional in my anger towards CIA. And I think that comes out on the air quite regularly.
Right.
And so the idea that I'm working for the CIA is like deranged.
Well, if it helps, he said I'm funded by Russia now. Since the interview, he then did a thing and said I was funded by Russia.
But you would be a lot more likely to take Russian money than I would be to work for the CIA, because you would never take Russian money and you're not Russian. But I mean, I really hate the CIA. And I mean,
right.
That's like very offensive to me. So why would you?
It's like personal for you.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah.
And anyway, like, who is this kid exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just an accident that the guy exclusively goes after people who are in roughly the same. And then he gets up there and he's like, making Holocaust jokes. And it's like, is it possible that this is like David Duke? And David Duke, every time I had a new show, David Duke would endorse my show. I don't know, who the hell is David Duke? Well, David Duke is obviously part of a campaign to discredit people on the right, obviously. And I think it's very obvious that Nick Fuentes is exactly the same. Doesn't mean everything he says is false. It doesn't mean he's not talented. He's enormously talented. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. I'm not attacking him personally, but he is clearly part of a campaign to discredit non-crazy right voices. That's obvious to me. I've been around a long time. I know it when I see it.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't understand it. We were very kind to him. Like, I truly, like, we almost said, like, we felt maybe he was a bit lonely. We should invite him back for dinner. I mean, that's how good of an experience I had.
It's clearly,
and then it was a 180. So it's either A, it's being driven from like a little boy insecurity. And he just was so worried that he like just went on the attack because he doesn't know how to have normal relations after being banned everywhere.
Well, I think there's that
could be one element.
The angry gay kid thing going on. Yeah.
Or it's what you're saying, where he does this, he's lying to everybody and pretending that things are one way when it's not. I can say
why is he attacking Joe Kent, who, Joe Kent worked as a CIA contractor, paramilitary contractor. He was in the U.S. military for years fighting our neocon wars. And his wife was killed in Syria in one of those wars. Joe Kent is the single most sincere critic, and I would say the one with the most credibility in the United States to say this foreign policy is bad. It killed my wife. I was a part of it. Joe Kent is actually someone the CIA doesn't like at all because he understands how it operates. And for Nick Fuentes, who's like some child from Chicago, to go after him specifically, one congressional seat in Washington State.
That is random.
It's not random, though. It's the opposite of random. Joe Kent was number one on the list of people they wanted to knock off, people who believe in our neocon foreign policy. They wanted Joe Kent out because he could stand up and say, I actually know. I've got the receipts. My wife was killed in Syria. You had to take that guy out. And Nick Fuentes, this child, this weird little gay kid in his basement in Chicago, is participating in a super PAC to bump off Joe Kent. Like, I've been around this my whole life. I know what that is. It's just an organized effort.
Yeah.
And he also did the thing that David Duke always did, including to me, which is be like, oh, yeah, it's my friend. And everyone's like, oh, Tucker Carlson's been endorsed by David Duke. I've been making like the anti-racist argument my whole life.
Right.
Like, I'm not for David Duke. Do I think David Duke is right when he's against affirmative action? You bet I do. But I'm not for David Duke. But David Duke would try to discredit people by hugging them. And that's exactly what Fuentes did. He goes out there, meet all these people, show up, hi, I'm Nick Fuentes. Can I get my picture with you? That's a campaign to destroy credible voices on the right. And Fuentes is part of it. And I know I'm inviting endless trouble by saying this because, this is a kid with a lot of spare time, but it's just a fact. And I've seen it a lot. Yeah. And I you can believe me or not, but I know what I'm talking about.
I can confirm he's dishonest. I mean, so it's like you use that as your, like, I could not determine what his motives were. And I said, you know what? I don't have time for this. I gave you a fair chance, gave you a fair shake, and you are a fundamentally dishonest human being. There was no reason to do it. If he had not done that show and screamed and yelled, his followers would have been like, oh, that was an interesting conversation between two people who agreed some, disagreed some, and like that was it. It was interesting that he got there. He doesn't want to be, and I can tell you that he doesn't want to be anywhere but where he is. He doesn't want to have normal relations. And it did sort of feel, and I said that to him, that he's like responding to orders somewhere because why are you attacking me?
Well,
why are you attacking Dave Smith? What is the issue with Dave Smith? And he couldn't answer the question.
Exactly.
He couldn't answer the question. He was just like, well.
The fakest thing I've ever seen.
And I'm like, why do you hate Dave Smith over Joe Rogan? And it's like, well, Dave Smith is this kind of a Jew. And I'm like, okay, I don't either. You really are this immature and you haven't gotten further in your ideas, or you're just attacking people and making people think that these attacks are legitimate when they're really not. And we were so kind to him that I was just like, okay.
He's attacking Dave Smith because Dave Smith is effective and credible.
He's very effective.
Because he's smart. He's a decent person. There's no hate on Dave Smith. And you would smell it if there was and there isn't. And he has credibility and he has knowledge. And he's a marvelous debater. And once again, a really good person. So you have to take out Dave Smith. You have to take out Joe Kent. Those are the good people. You have to take out J.D. Vance. He was against J.D. Vance. So if you're against like more pointless wars on behalf of foreign powers, like you're probably not going to be attacking J.D. Vance. And Vance was exactly the person he was attacking. So this And the sad thing is, and I know that no one who watches him will believe me because they're desperate, because they are the victims of a system that hates him. It's young white men who've been totally cut out of our economy, attacked mercilessly, given, narcotics, just go die. I mean, they really are the victims, and they're desperate, and no one speaks for them. So they go to Fuentes because he's like incredibly articulate, and they think he's our leader. But in one of the saddest ironies of all, like he's acting against your interests, actually. It's it's really dark.
Yeah, I don't believe he says, I no longer think that he believes what he says. And I can say that, like, even the whole, I just say I'm a racist. I know in part he says stuff to be entertaining, and that's fine. There's an element of it that is meant to be entertaining. But you got on a flight to come down onto a podcast with a Black woman. Like, I don't think you're racist. I don't believe your ideas that women, it's like, women need to shut up. It's like, okay, why are you on my podcast? Why are you saying that you want people to have you on their podcasts? So there's just there's a gap between what he says and how he acts. And for me, that's just worthy of dismissing, full stop. Be authentic. I don't care who you are. Like, genuinely, I kind of like Taylor Lorenz because I know that she actually believes what she says.
Totally
you get what I'm
agree.
saying?
I
At least she's authentic. And she's been wearing a mask for 5 years. Okay, it is real to her. COVID is real to her. This is not a performance. She is not. This is not CNN. It's not Jake Tapper. And I respect it. I told my parents, I was like, I kind of like her. It's weird because I know she's authentic, and we would just genuinely never agree. We would always be at odds, but we would recognize that you truly believe this, and you are still double masked in 2025.
I'm so with you.
Yeah, I like her because it's real, and that's all it takes for me to like someone. I have to know that you believe what you're saying. And I'm good with Taylor Lorenz.
Oh, that's so perfect. That is such a great. I ran into her in some foreign country. I was giving a speech somewhere in a foreign country. I think it was in the Middle East. But anyway, she comes up to me at the speech and she's wearing a mask. I have no idea who this person is. But I look at her eyes and they're kind of going in different directions. And they're like super intense. She goes, "Hi, it's Taylor. I don't know her. I've never met her." And I was like, "Oh, Taylor Lorenz?" And she's like, "Yeah." And so my only takeaway was the intensity is real.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah, so it's like, how can you not like her? The people that I can't stand are people who get up there, like the Jake Tappers of the world, who get up there and they say stuff they don't believe. It's not how they live. It's not what their true positions are.
Right.
They say it for a check. Taylor Lorenz, it's not a check for her. Okay, I'm like, that stops at wearing. She's been wearing a mask for 5 years. She hasn't seen her face in 5 years. Okay, this is real for Taylor Lorenz, and I therefore like her. That's how my brain works. I am here for Taylor Lorenz.
I think it's a great way to judge people.
Just be authentic.
I do. Yeah. I do. I think telling the truth, even if you're wrong, doing your best really, really matters. So you mentioned before that last year was just a tsunami of attacks on you, not simply on your views and their accuracy, which I think is, it's legitimate to critique anything any of us say on the basis of whether or not it's true, but on your character.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very intense. They attacked your family. I won't go deeper than that, but you know what I'm talking about. I mean, they really went after you, your opponents. How did that affect you?
It was one of the strangest things where it strengthened us in a way. I think you have to get real up close to the devil, but just really see it in its action and its form, and then you just go, okay, like we're doing this, and there's no thinking because you're just fighting. And then I think about last year, it was just, we were constantly fighting and very focused in those fights. And
not with each other.
No, me and my husband were just like, we've truly, I mean, not to say we've never been more united, we've always been united, but we are the way, what we went through last year, it was just, we can make it through anything,
How do you keep
He was so calm. And I do think I attribute that to his faith. I attribute that, my husband is a spiritual leader first and foremost. And I think if he had shown even a fraction of uncertainty, I probably would have come apart. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
But he was it was amazing. I don't know how he does it. I've reflected to him because obviously we've survived it. We came back bigger and stronger. And I just look back and I go, were you like dying on the inside? Were you like going into the closet and crying, behind my bag? Because I don't know how George did it. I really don't know how he did it. But he was just laser focused. Nothing was a drama or a saga. It's like, Australia's banned us. And he's just like, okay, here's the person on the phone with the lawyer. We're going to go. And we are right now in the Supreme Court in Australia right now. The case is called Candace Owens versus the Commonwealth of Australia. Among other versus France versus Australia. And he's like, here's what we're going to do. And so it was one of those things where when you go through those sorts of attacks, it either breaks you or it strengthens you. And it strengthened us. And I didn't think that we needed to be strengthened. And so now I'm so grateful for last year because there was this divine clarity that came into our lives. Who are our real friends, right?
Yes.
Who are our real friends? And these other people, how could we have ever thought that they were our friends? Like even waiting to see who's going to speak out and say that this is wrong. Like the number one litmus test is, let's not forget, before we even get down to the books that I've read and what I think now, all I said was Christ is king. Okay. This was like, it's anti-Semitic, it's layered, it's this, it's that. And there were people who I would have been like, I've always been friendly with, who were making videos legitimatizing that. Like she didn't say it directed to anybody, but it could have been kind of implied. And this is why you shouldn't say Christ is king. And we're looking around going, what is going on right now? What is happening? And I think at that moment,
one of the craziest controversies I've ever seen.
Controversy.
So there were people on the so-called right who attacked you for saying Christ is king?
Of course there were. And one of those people was, and I've been very vocal about it because he's such a bad person, Seth Dillon. And what makes him such a bad person is I really stood up for Seth Dillon when it mattered.
I did too.
When it really mattered. And he thought he was going to lose everything.
Yep.
And I did it privately, no fanfare, just because I wanted the right thing to be done to him. And at a moment, if he had just given me silence, that would have been friendship in that moment. Like the whole world is coming after me. I just lost my job. I'm trending, from here to Timbuktu. If you had just been quiet and said nothing about Christ is king, I would have been like, that was nice. Thank you for not adding to the chorus. No. He added to the chorus, and then would like privately try to message me to be like, well, and this was their whole big idea. They were attributing it to Nick Fuentes. And I had no idea that Nick Fuentes chanted Christ is king. And by the way, if he does chant Christ is king, good. That's a good thing. Like I want everyone to be chanting Christ is king. But he basically...
It's like fundamental like Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if Nick Fuentes is saying Jesus is king, he is. And so he was sort of saying to me that I would have to make a layered statement about Christ is king. And
he said that to you?
Very much came across. I said to him, I'll publish, because when he denied it publicly, I said, let me publish the text messages. And then he went radio silent, because I don't lie, okay? I don't lie. And he wanted me to make a statement against Groypers. So my whole world is coming down. And Seth Dillon's like, here's what you can do for me if you'd like a life raft. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just tweet against the Groypers. And I was just like, seriously, Seth? F you. When your family had something that you were going, and I stood up for you, and there was nothing for me to gain, everything for me to lose. And you're upset about random frog accounts on the internet, and you're adding to this chorus of things that are being said against me. And it's amazing.
He's a betrayer.
He is. He's deceitful. He is the Judas at your table. He'll break bread with you, come to your house, and feel nothing when he stabs you in the back.
Yes.
And so but I was just early. Now everyone sees it, because now that him and Joel Berry have been so deranged in their pro-Israel commentary. Like they literally like applaud when I genuinely think that these people smile when Palestinian children die. But I saw it early. I saw his character early, when all that was required for him to be a friend was to just be quiet. He couldn't do it. He added to it.
I had exactly the same experience. Exactly the same experience with him. I put him on twice at the request of other people. I took him out to dinner, my house. And I did think it's kind of weird. And I totally supported the Babylon Bee. I love the idea of it. I don't read it, but I want something like that. And I think there are probably really nice people who work there, I assume.
No.
But I remember thinking, and even saying to one of my producers, boy, for a guy who runs a comedy site, he's not funny at all. Mm-hmm. And he seems to have no interest in comedy at all. Not that I'm a comedian, but I like funny things, I'm a shallow guy. And I did think that was weird. And I didn't like his vibe. However, I did it twice. And then I had Daryl Cooper on the last day of August last year. I did not think it was controversial at all.
It wasn't.
No, and Daryl Cooper's like not even right wing. I mean, Daryl Cooper's just like a really nice guy. And it was, he's a Holocaust denier, which he is not. That's a lie. Or at least he didn't do it on my show. He's never done it in conversation with me. Whatever. It became this manufactured controversy. And one of my producers was like, Seth Dillon is attacking you. I was like, I don't think so. I mean, I really helped that guy twice. And because he was, his site was being banned or whatever. So I text Seth Dillon and I'm like, are you really attacking me? And he starts like lecturing me in a very high-handed way. And I, of course, took the bait. And then he published some of the texts. And
so he does. Okay, that's good to know. He publishes private.
I may be misremembering this, but he came up to me at an event in I was campaigning for Donald Trump, and he was there. He was very excited to be there. And he comes up to me. I was standing with a bunch of people, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, and he comes up and he's like, well, I think you should forgive me. You're a Christian. You say you're a Christian. You should forgive me. And I should forgive him because I am a Christian. And that's like a requirement of our religion. But I just couldn't because of all the people I've dealt with. I met Kim Jong-un once. I'm not quite as mad at him as I am at Seth Dillon because I just, the betrayal, the superciliousness, the stupidity, and the cruelty of it, I just couldn't.
Oh, but he's gone masked down. I mean, he accidentally sent a screenshot. They didn't realize, like James Lindsay, he sends screenshots to James Lindsay.
Who's
and then
James Lindsay?
I don't know who he is, but I know that he's always on Twitter in the same puddle of people who are constantly just like, I don't know, like applauding Palestinian death. And he asked James Lindsay, didn't realize that it showed that it was from Seth Dillon's account. So clearly Seth Dillon had texted it to him. And then James Lindsay then like said something about what it was. And it was just amazing. It was just a masked down moment where it's like, yeah, you're all on a group chat and you're sharing information of people who to attack. And you presented yourself as like the funny, nice guy. And you're anything but. Like, you know, you're quite sinister. And we all kind of fell for it for a little bit because I'm just the guy who does satire. No, you are like a totally deranged, angry individual who would literally break bread with anyone and then stab them in the back. And so for me, like I said, I fear nothing. I was like, release messages. Daylight, I will survive daylight. I have always treated people with kindness, and I have always worked very hard. I tell the truth. So there's nothing that Seth Dillon can expose about me that's going to hurt my feelings, you know, or make me look like I'm a bad person. He's genuinely a bad person. So these were the sorts of individuals, like last year when we were going through it, where I was like, did I misremember us being like, putting everything on the line to help him? And could he just give us silence for a couple of weeks? Like, just don't add into the chorus. I'm not asking you to defend me. I'm asking you to not joining in the chorus of people.
It is just a weird world when you wake up and realize like Taylor Lorenz is obviously kind of deranged. Her views are like repugnant to me. I've made fun of Taylor Lorenz like for a living. I've literally been paid to make fun of Taylor Lorenz. I'll admit it. But when you realize that she is actually a much more sincere and decent person than the guy who runs the Babylon Bee, then you realize, wow.
What's going on?
Yeah, what's
she's more
going
sincere.
on?
I disagree with her on everything, but she's more sincere. Like, I don't think she's privately like being like, I'm not scared of COVID. Like, she's scared of COVID. You know what I mean? So she's at least sincere.
Totally.
She's wrong, but she's sincere.
Totally.
And yeah, that's that. But I think that's what last year really was, is there was this moment where it needed to happen. There was this organic shedding where we got to see people for who they actually were. And a lot of people didn't survive last year. They're not the same. You know, it's not these people that were really big who spent all the time attacking. Now people are looking at them going, what was that? Because you can't attack yourself into success, right? You can't step on somebody's head when they're drowning and think that people are not going to realize what you did. Because like we said earlier, at the end of the day, you're not in a battle with Candace Owens, you're in a battle with truth. And I wouldn't want to be on the side of lies when you're in a battle against truth. Okay, I told the truth. I said Christ is king. When I told even about Brigitte, whatever it is, whatever you're attacking me for, eventually the truth is going to win. And you guys keep banking on the lies. And so I'm happy. I'm very happy last year happened. I was very happy to delete a lot of these people from my contacts. And it was a clarifying year that I can only look back on and thank God. You got to thank God for moments of clarity.
So maybe the interview I expected least, was most surprised by, but kind of weirdly delighted by, was Harvey Weinstein. How did that happen? What was the thinking?
You know, the backstory of that actually is somebody in Harvey's orbit reached out to me while I was at the Daily Wire and said, I'd really like you to get on the phone with Harvey. I'd love for you to like think about sitting down and interviewing him and doing all this stuff. And, you know, at that time I thought he was guilty of sin, like everybody else did, because there were just so many women, and was thinking, wow, he must be pretty desperate to want to like reach out to me. I know he's left leaning, like I'll do it. Sure. Fine. And I got on the phone with him in prison and was very surprised that clearly this friend was kind of lying, and Oprah was being floated to do the interview. And he's like, why on earth would I give you this interview? He was very, very powerful. And I always describe it as Harvey has like a growl about him. He's still very powerful. And he kind of lashed me and said, you know, I support the ADL, and talked about Kanye and talked about my support for Trump. I mean, he was all over the place, still a leftist in his prison cell. And I was kind of amazed by this.
He lectured you about the ADL from prison?
From prison. It was incredible. My autobiography is going to be amazing. If I ever sit down and write one, like that's definitely a highlight. I'm getting lectured by Harvey Weinstein. He's in prison. And then I was sort of like, I realized at that point that I was trying out for like one of his movies in a way. And I had to kind of sell myself of like why I wanted to do the interview. And then I thought this was so strange. And then I hung up and I looked into the case because that person then sent me the stuff and I was just shocked. I've never seen a crazier conviction in my entire life. He literally got convicted because people were crying even in the face of overwhelming evidence. I mean, one case, his argument is, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even there. It's not even like he's like, I know this woman. He's like, I don't even stay at that hotel. And I don't know this woman. And the judge would not allow him, talking about the corruption of courts, to subpoena her cell phone records to see if she was even there. And that was the person that got him 15 years in LA. The cases are incredible. You were raped by him over the course of 10 years. Help me understand this. And none of these women are young, by the way, because then I'm like, maybe there was an argument. They were 17 and he manipulated. They were so young. These women were 30 years old. We know what this is. This is a sugar baby traditional relationship. This is how it's always been in Hollywood. Young girls want careers. They sleep with directors. They do that stuff consensually. And I think in the case of Harvey Weinstein, because he actually cared very deeply about his movies, they assumed he was going to give them these roles. And he didn't. He was sort of like, yeah, I'm Harvey Weinstein. These girls threw themselves at him thinking there was going to be an exchange, and there just wasn't one. And then if you look back in your life and now you're 50 and you slept with Harvey Weinstein, like not the hottest Brad Pitt looking person, you're like, what did I get for this? And you kind of then see this movement taking off and it's Me Too. And suddenly it's, he had the power and yeah, so what? I sent him a couple of emails saying I love you after he raped me, which they did. Yeah, because that's what
Actually?
I guess. Yeah, no, love you, miss you. But constantly the emails, when you read through them, because there's a trove of them, are always them trying to be like, hey, I hear there's an upcoming audition. I'd love to attend the audition. Or I'm going to Cannes. Can you get me some tickets? I mean, it is what it is. This was your traditional oldest trade in the book is what I would say. The oldest trade in the book.
So okay, for a hardened anti-Semite Nazi like you,
I'm failing at it.
You're defending the ADL defender, Harvey Weinstein. Like what? Why? So a lot of people look at this and first of all, I just want to say I support it. Just that I'm joking, and I support it only because I think that justice matters. I know Harvey Weinstein, he's a pig, as you know.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't mean he's a criminal.
Right.
And I just think it's important to convict people when they violate the law and not to convict them when they don't.
Right.
And truth is the most important thing. So I support it. But it is like, of all the stories, like what drew you to that?
Well, because he was the beginning of the Me Too movement. And I've had a gripe from the Me Too movement from the day that it trended on Twitter. I mean, you can go back. I am left and right. People were scared to say anything about the Me Too movement when it first happened because it was about rape. And people are instantly uncomfortable. And left and right, people were just sort of reticent to say, oh, but don't we need to have due diligence here? And people were losing their jobs left and right on the basis of an allegation because it was hashtag trending, hashtag Me Too. And right away, when it first started trending,
it was mob justice.
Yep. I said something against it and I almost got canceled. Like, I will never forget this. Charlie Kirk, we had to get together with the PR agents. I was at Turning Point. He had Turning Point girls that were quitting, crying, saying, how could she not support the Me Too movement? Like I was sexually, it was totally, and credit to Charlie Kirk, like he held down the line. Because, like I said, if you stand on truth, eventually people catch up and realize that something's really wrong with this movement. But Harvey was this case where I think the entire world agreed that he must have been guilty of something. There were just so many women that were coming out saying that this took place.
And his personal style was so, he's like eating with his mouth open, smoking in the elevator. I mean, I saw him do it. And so I think because he is just like this piggish, overbearing, crass guy, which is not a crime.
Yeah. You just want to see him go down.
Well, then he must have done it.
Right.
And like, are you really going to take the side of Harvey Weinstein?
Right.
He's today's villain.
And I thought I was just doing an interview where I was going to push back, get to the truth. And when I looked at these cases, I was just shocked. 90 women who came out and said he did something, and it actually boiled down to 3 cases. And in the 2 New York ones that he got 26 years for, I mean, just you read the emails, it's crazy. You just cannot come out of reading the emails from Jessica Mann and Evgenia, I'm blanking on her last name, and just go, what happened here? Like, what do you mean you convicted him of rape? On the basis of these emails alone, why would you then, has anybody ever, and Jessica Mann clearly is the first person ever who's done this, hit up their rapist after and been like, hey, I'm with my mom in town. Like, can we come by? Do you want to meet my mom? Actually, that's one of the emails post-rape, It's hard for me to believe that that's rape. I don't believe, if you're lucky I wasn't sitting on that jury. And I think it does a tremendous injustice to two people. First, women, right, who are actually raped.
Yeah, of course.
Because if we're now saying all of this is rape, and then people are just not going to be inclined to believe women who are actually raped. They're going to go, oh, another rape situation. Okay. So that's it. It's like you're softening what it means to be raped. But the second thing is I have 3 sons. This case mattered to me because my sons' lives are now threatened by this movement that said, #believe women. Women lie. They lie a lot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so why don't we do this crazy thing and just believe the facts and follow the facts of the case? And so I was very concerned when this movement just kind of got carried away. I even had to defend someone who I don't like, Matt Lauer. That was a crazy case.
Yes.
Very clearly had a consensual relationship all over New York with that intern.
Yes.
But she was raped the first time. And then, all the other times, apparently it wasn't rape, but it doesn't really matter because here's a check, right? And that's what happened. And to this day, he carries on being branded a rapist. Like, people still say that about Matt Lauer because somebody made an allegation. And when you look at the facts, it's like, no, he was a scumbag. He was cheating on his wife. He was abusing his power, certainly, because the reason they probably wanted to sleep with him is because he was Matt Lauer of the Today Show. But to call him a rapist, like, is that fair?
I agree.
Is that okay? Can we at least all say, I don't care whether you're left or right, but that's wrong? And that was the challenge of the Harvey Weinstein
I know
case.
a lot about that story because that's the world I lived in. I knew him. And everything you said is true.
Of course. I mean, I am a woman. I clearly know that women will flirt with guys to get what they want, even if it's a drink at a bar. So you can only imagine Hollywood, where you welcome that climate of exchange. Women who are just want to be the next Angelina Jolie. They all think they're going to be the next Angelina Jolie, what they'd be willing to do for that part. And Harvey benefited from that. He was Harvey Weinstein. He's making the best movies that have been made in Hollywood. And honestly, I'd argue that movies haven't been great since Harvey went in, right? His movies were every classic movie that you can think of, Harvey Weinstein, the Weinstein Company produced. The what was it called? I can't think of the company's name. Miramax was his company, had produced. So it's a lot. It was a lot to unpack. And yet they still moved. Obviously the appellate judges said this case was completely ridiculous. It was rigged. Why'd you guys even allow these people into the courtroom just to convict his character, not based on the facts? And it got sent back down. But he just lost again on 2 of the cases. And so I just interviewed him, and that interview is coming out today, again, to ask him, okay, here's a broader question. Harvey, who hates you? Because this is so clearly somebody took you out. And that's how I look at the case now. Who were you involved with? Who did you piss off that wanted you to no longer be who you were in Hollywood? Because this is power. This is a structure. The judges are allowing this to take place for a reason. And his answers were quite interesting, and I think Harvey Weinstein did upset a lot of powerful people. And he was honest about that.
I get it. I have no trouble believing that at all, given his style, which is like totally overbearing and like awful. But throwing someone in prison for the rest of his life is, it's too much. He
said Gloria Allred told him if she paid him, and I view her as a gangster of sorts. Everyone knows how she moves. When she's on a case, she doesn't lose. That if he had paid her, and I want to say it was $1 million, don't quote me, that it would go away. She could make it go away. He didn't do it. Yeah. That's what he told me on record. So it's people are going to hear it from his own mouth. But that tells me that we're looking at maybe something different. And what was the Me Too movement? And I've spoken to other people that were victims of it, and they alleged to me that a lot of it has to do with publishing rights. That if they want to take out a business, you can force a person to essentially have to sell their business and their assets if you can create a scandal. And I'm inclined to believe that after examining the Michael Jackson case, because he was in a war with Sony over publishing rights, and suddenly he was being accused. And I didn't remember much about that case, but then when I went and I looked at it, it was a crazy story of like a kid who was drugged by his dad to say that he was raped by Michael Jackson. Literally, he was drugged by his father. And so you start to wonder if there's a lot of stuff that's happening in Hollywood that many people have tried to speak out about, and those people have either been deemed crazy or, in the case of Michael Jackson, he's into children. And we sort of pay attention to the media circus of everything without realizing that like there could be other stuff happening in Hollywood.
Do you think it's possible that Michael Jackson was not a child molester?
I am now convinced after looking at the case that he was not, and that he was at a war with Sony. And I did a whole episode on it. I was shocked because I grew up loving Michael Jackson, and then I was absolutely repulsed by Michael Jackson. Like, he meant so much in my childhood. And then I was repulsed by Michael Jackson. And then I decided to re-examine what happened. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I literally could not believe.
Like Harvey
He was
Weinstein.
winning. He was going to win the Beatles catalog. It was his. He was fighting Sony and winning. And then just like that, scandal, broke, dead. Even the way he died is weird, but like, it was a lot. When you go back and look at that case, you realize the media tells you so much, but they tell you absolutely nothing.
Michael Jackson was weird in the same way that Harvey Weinstein was obnoxious, in the same way that Richard Jewell seemed like a fake cop. The guy was blamed for the Atlanta Olympics bombing in '96 who didn't do it. They kind of fit your preconceptions of what a bad guy like that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson living in Neverland is weird, kind of personal Disney with all these little kids. You're like, he's clearly a kid toucher.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he definitely had issues because he felt that he had his childhood stolen from him. So he kind of made it his priority in this, I would say, very creepy way to constantly say, I'm going to create this Neverland ranch. And so kids are never going to go through anything. But it's quite telling that he was so close above with anybody else with Macaulay Culkin, right? Also, another person who alleged that he was being raped by directors was that Corey... I'm going to say Corey, maybe Feldman. Yeah. And he's been vocal about how he was abused. And both of those people said absolutely never, not once, did Michael Jackson do anything to them. They stood up for him. And then when you get into the people that said that he did something and you figure out what their motives were, one's drugged, one was paid, the Michael Jackson story gets completely crazy. And so what you had was a man who was stunted in his growth because of his childhood, who wanted to make the world a special, magical place for people. And he became the perfect, he won his case. So we can say Michael Jackson was not guilty, right? He actually won his case once the jury saw all the evidence. But it's kind of scary to think that a media circus can be created about you and people can believe things, just like we were saying with Matt Lauer.
Yes.
Absent very little fact because the media just keeps saying it. And that gets into the importance of why I select and get, I'm like a dog with a bone on certain cases. The Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case is another one. Again, Justin Baldoni is Jewish, obviously. So is Steve Sarowitz. I'm like the worst anti-Semite ever. Here I am defending these people. But it's the same thing. She went to the press and tried to smear this man and ruin his existence by claiming, in so many words, that he had sexually harassed her. And she made him sound, with the help of the New York Times, like he was an absolute creep, a pervert, a sex-addicted pervert. If you read that article, you took away that Justin Baldoni was a sex-addicted pervert, right? And poor Blake Lively had to survive doing a movie with him. If Brian Friedman had not done what he had done and published the entire, he said he had nothing to hide, every text message sent between Blake and Justin and Ryan Reynolds, the world would have believed what she and the New York Times had worked on. It's a shocking case. People are going, oh, it's just like celebrity drama. No, this isn't celebrity drama. This is so much deeper than that. Okay. We are talking about the corruption of the media who has the trust of the people. Like, you're an educated person, you read the New York Times, right? The New York Times essentially assisted in a hit on a man. For what reason? What did Blake actually want from Justin Baldoni? Publishing rights. And we got to read her messages, and she wanted to be put on the film, and she wanted to be put as a producer, executive producer, or else, right? You do this or else, threatening. So I'm not going to come back. Here are my demands. I mean, a total witch. Truly, that woman is possessed. I cannot, after reading those messages and Justin falling over himself because he was like, she's an A-lister, he was almost like pathetic, like stand up for yourself at a certain point. And what's happening right now, like in the court system in New York, they're allowing her to, I don't know, like it just seems like it's a very corrupt case. But what happened to Justin Baldoni, everyone should be reading those messages and realizing what the New York Times took part in, because we're seeing this happen over and over again, where the media, like the journalists, are acting like assassins, right? These are assassins. These are assassinations, right? You're going to hit someone. You're going to hit their entire career.
They're called hit pieces.
They're called hit pieces for a reason, because most people cannot survive them. Like, Matt Lauer did not survive it. Okay, that's over.
No,
Matt Lauer's career.
New Zealand.
Yeah, I didn't know he moved to New Zealand.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did not survive it. Michael Jackson, to this day, you don't know the facts of the Michael Jackson case, right? You know, do you think he did it, blah, blah, blah?
Well, I would say 100% he did. I mean, I don't know anything.
Right. But that's the point. You don't know anything, but the media makes you think you do, enough that you can have an assessment, which I was like you. Michael Jackson's guilty. I totally believed that.
Look at the guy. He had plastic surgery. He must be a child
Harvey
molester.
Weinstein was guilty.
Exactly.
Enough of noise from the media, and we don't even look for facts anymore. And I want people who watch my show to be trained in recognizing those patterns. When actually they're saying a lot, but they're not really saying much. You are watching a team of trained assassins take someone out. For what reason? I don't know. Then we can become, we can come up with conspiracies. But that's what this is, right? That's what this is. They're ignoring facts, because if they had presented the facts, none of us would have thought those things about Harvey Weinstein. We would have just said he's a creep who abuses power and he should step down, because nobody who's running a company should be sleeping with all of these women and cheating on his wife.
Exactly.
Like it's morally wrong.
Yeah.
Not criminally wrong.
It's interesting how you select your stories. It's non-ideological.
Yeah. It's
your interest seems to be, is it true or not?
Mm-hmm. It's principled. I don't care how you vote. I don't care if you give to the ADL. I'm on their list. Like I'm literally on the ADL's list, and Harvey Weinstein's like one of their biggest donors. Doesn't matter to me. Do I think he did this thing? Why does it matter? Because my sons have to grow up in that world. I have 3 sons. So yeah, I have a stake in this. We can't just have women going to the New York Times and making allegations. It was also New York Times with Harvey Weinstein. They were awarded Pulitzers. And we can't just have this happening. We can't have people having their lives ruined by the press absent any facts. And so there are tons of people that come to me and want me to take on their stories. And I try to take on as many as I can. Right now I'm obviously very much interested in the Epstein case. And so that's where I'm focusing my attention, the Epstein case.
What do you think that was? The Epstein case?
I would say Israel, obviously. And again, I'm so tired of us being gaslit. It's the dumbest gaslighting of all time. On record, okay, when Pam Bondi said,
I
can't even, this was just a moment where I was like, okay, like, F you guys hate us. Like, you have so much power. Why don't you just come out and say, nah, boo-boo, you can't touch us, F you. I would rather you do that, right?
Yes.
Than put on this pretense of a conference, and then you've got Trump over here being like, does anybody still care about Jeffrey Epstein? And then Pam Bondi is asked the question, was he working for another country? And she says, we don't know, right? You don't know? So in my series, I'm like, maybe we can help them. Maybe we can help the deep state figure out who Jeffrey Epstein was working for. Here is Ari Ben-Menashe, who was a Mossad agent, who is on record, literally recorded. Let's listen to him tell us about how Jeffrey Epstein was working for the Mossad. Okay, Ari Ben-Menashe worked for Mossad, and he's saying that Robert Maxwell brought him to Jeffrey Epstein and said, let this guy in. He's going to be involved in weapons. Hey, Pam Bondi, you might have missed this one. Okay, you might have missed this one. Then you go to another person who is on record, who is Victor Ostrovsky, who defected from the Mossad notoriously. The Mossad admits he worked for the Mossad. He wrote a book, By Deception or By Deception Only. He says that's the Mossad motto, which they obviously do that. That's why they execute all these false flags. And he told everybody the truth. He has said Jeffrey Epstein was working with us. So for whatever reason, Candace Owens is able to determine whether or not Jeffrey Epstein might have been working for another state. But Pam Bondi, they're just going to have to keep surmising about whether or not Jeffrey Epstein, who is with Ghislaine Maxwell, her father being Robert Maxwell. One of the biggest lies, by the way, that's told, and I debunked this in our first or our third Epstein episode, is the idea that, oh, well, yeah, Robert Maxwell, they admit he was a Mossad agent, but Epstein didn't know him. The story they try to tell now and fashion to the public is like Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein met after her dad was dead. That's just false. Again, Ari Ben-Menashe tells a story of being brought into the office and being told that Epstein was going to be brought in. This was the Iran-Contra scandal. So since the 80s, Jeffrey Epstein has been working for Israel. I don't know how I know that, and Trump and Pam Bondi don't, but they got to bring me in. Like, I might have some evidence here, right? It's like, so we're getting to a point now.
You're going to have tough confirmation hearings.
I just want them to say F you. Like, if seriously, that would feel better at this point if they just came out and said, F you, na boo boo, you can't touch us, we rule over you, haha. That would feel at least authentic. Going back to the Taylor Lorenz thing, I'd be like, I really don't like that, but at least it's authentic and I know you mean it and it's true.
All totally fair.
Yeah.
Does any of, to the extent that we can project forward and guess, does any of this come out? I mean, to a greater extent than it has? I mean, is there ever like a public resolution of this story?
No, because Israel's controlling our government. So no, the answer is no. Trump is powerless against him. We haven't had, I don't think we've been a sovereign nation since they shot JFK. And when I say they, it's like people online say, what do you mean by they? I'm talking about Israel. I don't want you guys to read in between. I'm talking about Israel. So let's stop making that a taboo subject because they've gone mask down. Everything they're doing is demonic. I want nothing to do with it. I will never support Israel into the future after what they've done to these children. The starvation campaign. I don't care. Please write your article. You've already written them all. I don't know what you could add about me. But I do not support Israel. And I don't think that Jewish Americans should support Israel. And I hope that they're now having those conversations. I see many of them recognizing that they have been propagandized into believing they have to support this demonic state. And that's in large part thanks to their birthright trip. Yeah, that mask down moment for Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL when he got caught on the hot mic, it was released. He didn't know that he was being recorded. And he's like, saying that they've got to get TikTok under control. He's like, we have a generational issue with TikTok. We need to do something about this like what we did with Birthright. What does that tell you? That the entire purpose of that Birthright trip, telling every Jewish American, you forget a free trip to Israel, was to propagandize you into believing that you have some affinity with this made-up country in the Middle East, like in 1948, that you have to, react when something's happening to them, or you have to look away when they're doing things that are so obviously wrong and demonic. And so I'm hoping now that we're getting to that point where people can recognize that whether you're Black, you don't have to agree with BLM. Whether you're Jewish, allowing your identity to shape your morality is problematic, okay? And Israel, in and of itself, is a demonic nation. I will never support Israel, right? So I went from working for PragerU to I will never support Israel. So that's how much the scales have fallen from my eyes about what they are involved in. And if this isn't your wake-up call to just look at the footage of what they are doing, they're playing Hunger Games and like throwing food at them and then killing people and seeing who survives. It's just at your fingertips. You have to take a look at what Israel is doing.
Your point that if you allow your identity to determine your morality is a very deep and I think important point that I've never heard anybody put it that way. But it does feel like we're moving toward a world in which, all ethics are situational and it all depends on who I am and who my tribe is and what my identity is. And there isn't, to the extent there used to be, a sense of like universal standards that apply to everyone, otherwise known as principles. You clearly operate by those principles. Does that accelerate, or do we return to a moment where we can say, oh, no, there are universal standards of behavior. Truth is an unchanging thing. Whether we have it or not is debatable, but there is something called truth. There is an actual reality. Or does AI just make all of it like?
I think the people that we're fighting wish that AI could make everything. I am troubled by AI. I'm troubled by people believing that AI is smart. It's obviously dumb. It requires you not to read books and to believe that everything it spins out, which is really just, they're scraping the internet, right? That's all it's doing.
Derivative
which
of what
then
other
gives the
people have
power to
written.
the same people.
Yeah.
New York Times. It's like they're just scraping the trusted sources and telling you this is a fact when it's not a fact. But I very much believe that something is happening globally right now spiritually. I think me even surviving last year is proof of that. Obviously, if lies were winning,
and not just surviving. I should point out, since you're not a braggart, thriving in a way that like nobody would have predicted, as measured by your numbers on your podcast, as measured by your family output. Now you're the mother of 4. Like, I don't even know how you like have a baby in the middle of all that, but you did. You're thriving, which is amazing. I never would have guessed that ever.
I hope that people take away from me living through it and surviving and coming out the other side is that it isn't worth your soul to tell a lie. Tell the truth, and that seems harder. That certainly in that moment of temptation feels harder when you're being promised the world. If you just don't say this thing, everything will stay the same. If you just pretend like you don't see what's happening in Gaza, you can have your life the way that you like it. That is, in my viewpoint, that is being tempted by Satan. That really is. And that is why they want you to be attached to money, right? That is why they don't even know how to try to destroy me outside of saying, we're going to financially crush you, right? We're going to keep you in lawsuits. We're going to sue you. I'm going to sue you for $8 billion because there's no truth in these people. Like money is the only motive. That's their only real power. And so I hope that when people, the millions of people that listen to my podcast every single day, that they get that there is something way bigger than that, way higher authority to that. And when you commit yourself to truth, right? What is Jesus? Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, right? I think that once you get through that temptation, you are rewarded if you do the right thing, if you do the moral thing and you do the principled thing. You're being tested. We're all being tested right now. That's what I truly believe. We're all being tested. And a lot of people are failing that test. But a lot of people aren't, right? Strange bedfellows. You had Anna Kasparian on this show. And I've been saying for a while that I liked her because I perceived that she was being authentic, even when I disagreed with her.
Oh, she's authentic.
Yeah. I was like, I disagree with her. And she's been terrible to me, but I perceive that she's being authentic. And we're seeing that happen. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that the left and the right are coming together on this topic, and that it doesn't matter if you're black or you're white. And so in that way, yeah, Israel, Israel has been a blessing, because I think for the first time, the entire world is in lockstep, realizing something is very wrong, that this is allowed to happen in broad daylight and no one is stopping it.
When you say you see something happening globally on the spiritual level, what do you mean?
What I mean by that is I can, and obviously I'm looking at my own metrics here, but we have people committed to watching my show all over the world, like using VPNs to watch this show all over the world. And as I don't view myself as an authority, I'm learning with them. I think that's what they enjoy about my show is I'm not like Jake Tapper sitting up here telling you she's deranged. I'm actually saying we're not getting answers here. And something's wrong.
Did he actually use the word deranged?
Like 6 times in the first minute.
Deranged?
Deranged, like 6 times in the first minute. It was glorious. It was so funny.
That's like a clinical diagnosis.
I mean, come on.
Have you seen a doctor?
Oh, yeah. You know who taught that theory of just diagnosing it? Yeah, Sigmund Freud. Yeah, There we go. So I recognize what you're doing. I read the book. You won't grok AI me. I know what you guys are about. Yeah, if you're telling the truth, just diagnose it. But yeah, that's what they do. They diagnose it. But yeah, I think we are seeing all around the world, people are kind of waking up to that and they're responding to it, and they tried to crush you. You're lucky you're not on X, because all they do is try to crush you. You're trending all the time over the most mundane things.
I am, really?
I love their hatred of Daryl Cooper. I love it because when you see him, he's like a nice historian.
And he really is.
But the world can see that, right? So that's why it works. That's why you asked me the question, Candace, why do you have so much joy? Because it is funny, right? And I think that my joy makes them even angrier, because I think it's so ridiculous. You're trying to sell to me that this guy, Daryl Cooper, is the second coming of Adolf Hitler. Like, that's funny. And then it makes people curious because you're going, he's so clearly not. So what is it that he's hit upon that has you guys so triggered? It's got to be a truth. Let me keep digging. And yeah, as soon as you start like asking any questions about the World War II narrative, which has been decided in our textbooks, which were printed by Robert Maxwell. Okay. We're getting into that, our Epstein series, he who prints the textbook is king. You start asking other questions, right? How has my mind been shaped since I was a child? Why do I feel this way? Why do I have an emotional response to these things that I don't understand? And that was set up for you. We were set up to not ask questions about certain things. And so now they're arriving at their final point, and this is why I love it so much, is that we've now forced them into a corner where their legitimate argument, as if it couldn't get more absurd, is that we have to just stop asking questions, right? You're not just asking questions. This is their new thing. You're not just asking questions. Why are you asking questions? Say what you really mean. They're the ones that are so clearly undone that we can't even ask questions. So we're winning.
The funny thing is, I actually am asking questions.
We all are.
I don't really understand a lot of things.
Right. We all are. We're reading and we're learning, and that scares them. So what does that tell you when exploring and learning and true education outside of the public school system terrifies them? What does it tell you? That they're hiding something. They're lying about something.
Of course.
You think I would be scared if you were asking questions and I knew the answers to them? I'd be like, yeah, no, here, you can come examine this 1,000 times. Like, you're lying about something, and the whole world can see that. So yeah, I'd be pretty upset if I were you too, because you have been on the side of the author of lies. You've been just...
Liars are afraid and weak, as I said, brittle, and you can just feel it. And I've experienced it. I've lied. And the second you lie, you're like afraid. Well, you're afraid, of course, the lie being exposed, but I think the fear is deeper than that. I think it weakens you.
Yeah, and it makes you look ridiculous.
Well, that's exactly right. It's humiliating. So we do have a lot of our subscribers who are very excited that you were coming. Very excited. I feel like we have some overlap. So they sent in a million questions. We get through with a couple of them. They're actually good questions. Here's one. I don't know if you can even answer this. What do you think of the Daily Wire now that you've been gone for a while?
I think I wish the best to the Daily Wire. I wouldn't change a single thing about what happened, how it went down. In the moment, it seemed so crazy, but I think in every action, people get to see who you are and what you're made of. And the Daily Wire got to tell their story and I got to tell mine. So you
get, you were a big deal, obviously, at the Daily Wire, a little bigger than we realized. When you left, we found out what a big deal you were. So no one wants to lose a job where they're succeeding. But in retrospect, do you feel like that was part of a larger plan?
Yeah, God's plan for sure.
That's what I mean.
And now with the things and the discussions that I'm having with my viewers, there's no way I could have been at the Daily Wire. It just wouldn't have worked. It worked for a little bit and then it suddenly was not working. And now it definitively, we would not be a good match. And at the end of the day, I just don't view myself as in competition with the Daily Wire. Like I am interested in totally different things.
Well, you're a lot bigger than the Daily Wire. Just on the numbers, you're much bigger than the Daily Wire.
And I think that's in part because removing the Daily Wire as the conduit to my ideas was a good thing. Like I don't have to have a bunch of people as it is at any corporation. Like, can you talk about that topic? Is it okay? What do the lawyers think?
Right, that's right.
I got to remove all of that and I get to go right to my audience. So I'm grateful.
And you don't have to take credit or blame for what others on that channel do.
Right.
I felt this way working for big companies. It was like, I can't believe that I hate your company or I love your company. It's like, it's not exactly connected to me. I work there, but...
Exactly. And I'm definitely somebody that I think I thrive when I get to just truly say and express myself entirely exactly how I feel every second of every day. And I'm interested in so many different topics and it was getting increasingly difficult to kind of explore things that I was interested in without having to worry about whether it would upset this person or that person or how a legal person felt about this. And at that point, you're not having fun. Then it becomes a job, right? It always was a job, but then it becomes a job, meaning that you're waking up every day and you're like, oh. And now I wake up every day and I'm thrilled and I'm researching and I'm learning with my audience. So I'm happier. I hope the Daily Wire is happier. And that's it.
And this is another question. Do you ever fear that people want to harm you?
I know people want to harm me, so I don't have to fear it.
Fair.
Yeah, in case you missed it, a guy tried to kill me last year. Contacted by the FBI. So there's nothing to fear. Just embrace that people are deranged and people are crazy. And of course, people want to harm me. Do I fear it? No, because I don't fear death. And I think that is the true challenge of being a Christian. I asked myself this question when there are so many people who purport to be Christians and they won't say things that they know are true, or they actually say things that they know to be false because they're fearful of losing their jobs, right? And if you are responding or you're behaving in a certain way or not saying something because you're fearful of something like the moment right now, do you believe in the afterlife? Do you believe in Christ? Do you know that you're actually not just trying to get paid by a check, but also trying to get into heaven, right? That's the bigger thing. So I go for the bigger thing. And I know that no matter what, I will be okay. My husband makes sure that he says his number one goal is to make sure that all of us are getting into heaven. So
this is not the end.
Yeah.
Last question. Do you have advice for the president, whom you know? You said you spoke by phone. I know you've been a supporter of his for a long time, but do you have advice for him now?
Yes. My advice to him would be my advice to very many people who I've seen become very big and then get very small or have their supporters turn on them, which is don't ever get to the point where you think you're smarter than your audience. And I think that for Trump right now, and I'm speaking specifically about the gaslighting of, are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein and then saying, I don't want any supporters that are still into this. That means that you see yourself as a king and you've stopped listening. You're not responding to the movement anymore. And what made us get behind you was that despite the fact that we knew you were this boisterous billionaire, was that you had a way of communicating with and understanding how people felt, right? The blue collar worker, how that person felt, the person that's listening to you, the truck driver, the plumbers. And when you respond with, well, I don't want your support or gaslighting, you've lost touch a little bit with your audience. Just don't never think that you're smarter than your audience. I'm constantly getting feedback from my audience and trying to figure out what they're interested in and how I can be better, even if it's slight tweaks of things like, oh, I don't like the way the audio sounds or this. And they like that. They know, because then they know that you care, and I do care. And I think that Trump's message over the last few weeks with the Epstein fumble, as I'm going to refer to it as, makes people think that he doesn't care. And I think he does care. So he should change that.
think that's very wise advice. I think that's the wisest advice you could give. Not surprisingly.
Got kids.
So my last question is, because I was thinking about you and my son this morning. You do have like a obvious peace and joy about you. It's just obvious. It's not fake. It's just with you and your husband and your youngest child off camera, and it's totally real. What is your spiritual practice?
Well, we're Catholic.
Yeah.
Right? My family's Catholic. When George and I first got married, I was not Catholic. I was Protestant. And to see just God's design and everything and how me and George met and how he then was so drawn back into his faith, like I would definitely say he was not a practicing Catholic when we got married, or else he would have told me that I had to convert before we got married, actually, because he's that deep into the faith now. But our marriage has brought us closer to faith, and I made the decision, not knowing how all this was going to play out, but to become baptized into the Catholic Church. And it's just interesting how, there is a divine aspect to everything that's happening, the timing of everything. I never question God's timing, even when things seem terrible, right? When the whole world is rooting for you to fail, saying she's canceled and it's over. The reason why I survived it and the reason why I'm happy is because I have real faith, and also because I know that that's just a veneer that's been created for us. The idea that like your media and that if the New York Times can take you out, you don't have enough substance in your life. They can't threaten me because they haven't created anything that's real in my life. They have no control over anything that's real in my life. And if you think I care about a headline, I couldn't care less about a headline. You're going to try to get me canceled from speaking at an event. Like, okay, they're probably serving rubber chicken anyways. If that goes through, great, amazing. And that's not going to be enough of a threat for me to give up speaking truth, because, and this is the part that I really want to get to because it's super important for people to hear this. I'm encouraged when people say that I give them the courage, right? That's the greatest thing. That's the greatest compliment that I can receive, that they were quiet about something and now they are vocal about it because they realize it matters. Our children are going to inherit the world that we allow them to inherit. So if we decide to become creatures of, pleasure and creatures of social media and creatures of a lack of focus and ultimately creatures of fear and cowardice, they will inherit the world, right? That we've left behind for them. It's so important to stand up for what's right, because your children, if you don't stand up to the demons, those demons are only going to grow more powerful.
That's right.
And your children are going to be the ones that suffer it, right? So the question is, do you care enough about it to protect your children? To moms and dads, right? When you say, I didn't say the thing, so I just went along with the COVID thing, you would allow them to poison your kids? Like, because you were just scared to say something? And again, because we live in this society of pleasure, and we live in this, everything's so momentary and social media and a distraction, we've actually become a very weakened species. Like, I am so driven by who my grandfather was. I always say this. People are like, what's up with this girl? Why is she so happy? I say, my grandfather blessed me. He spoiled me. And I just looked at him as such a man, like truly what it means, like to embody faith, his family. It was all that he cared about, faith, family. And he could look you in the eye and do a deal on a handshake, right? If he said he was going to be there, he was going to be there. If he said he wasn't going to be, he was going to do this, he was going to do that, We need to go back to that. We've lost that in this society. Everyone's so deceptive and sneaky, and they don't say what they mean, and there's contracts, and they're tricky contracts, and everyone's leaking stuff to the press. Have some respect, for yourself and for your family, to be a better person and to speak up when something is wrong.
Amen. I can't improve on that. Candace Owens, thank you.
Thank you so much.
For taking all this time, and congratulations. I think that your example, even if people disagree with you, I think they have to say, this is a woman who's purely sincere, and I don't think there's a higher compliment. So
thank you.
Thank you
so much. A lot coming from you.
So it turns out that YouTube is suppressing this show. On one level, that's not surprising. That's what they do. But on another level, it's shocking. With everything that's going on in the world right now, all the change taking place in our economy and our politics, with the wars we're on the cusp of fighting right now, Google has decided you should have less information rather than more. And that is totally wrong. It's immoral. What can you do about it? Well, we could whine about it. That's a waste of time. We're not in charge of Google. Or we could find a way around it, a way that you could actually get information that is true, not intentionally deceptive. The way to do that on YouTube, we think, is to subscribe to our channel. Subscribe.
hit the little bell icon to be notified when we upload and share this video. That way you'll have a much higher chance of hearing actual news and information. So we hope that you'll do that.